Chapter 1089. Whoosh! Just when everyone's attention was focused on the spring, another sword light suddenly appeared. Unexpectedly, it went straight for Yang Qindong, who was standing 30 meters away from the spring. The appearance of the sword light did indeed catch everyone off guard. At least the two Longwei who were protecting Yang Qindong were not fully prepared. Just a moment ago, their eyes were still on the spring. Who would have thought that a new sword light would appear and the target would be them? However, no matter how sudden the sword light was, the two Longwei instinctively blocked in front of Yang Qindong with their swords. They only had one goal. Even if they had to die, they could not let the sixth young master get hurt. Otherwise, they did not deserve to be a member of the Longwei. Get out of the way. The two Longwei instinctively wanted to use their bodies to block the sixth young master and complete their mission. Because of their panic, they were a little unsteady and exposed a flaw in their defense. Yang Qindong, who was protected behind them, saw this scene clearly. So at the critical moment, he shouted and pushed the two Longwei who were blocking in front of him gently with his palms. This push made the two of them walk around the gates of hell. At the last moment, they did not use their bodies as shields. However, while Yang Qindong saved the two Longwei, he also exposed himself to the sword light. He watched as the cold sword essence pierced towards his throat. Qiu Vi, who had already turned his attention to this dangerous scene, saw it. He was so nervous that his heart almost jumped out of his chest. If anything happened to the sixth young master, even if he was only slightly injured, he would not be able to atone for his sins. And once he was stabbed by this sword, he was afraid that it would not be as simple as a small injury. If something really happened to him, he would become Yang Xie's sinner. Thinking of this, Qiu Vi shouted and desperately rushed forward. He only hoped that the sixth young master's injury would be less serious, so that even if he died, he could die with a smile on his face. Everyone was stunned, and Junko, who had been rescued, cried out in alarm. The sword was getting closer and closer to Yang Qindong's throat, and there was no way to dodge it. Yang Qindong looked very calm in the face of this fatal sword strike. There was no trace of panic in his eyes. When the sword was less than half a fist away from his throat, he suddenly jumped up and retreated, as if he had been pulled by a wire and was shooting a movie. The ninja who attacked didn't expect such a result. He was even prepared that Yang Qindong would dodge, and if his first attack failed, he would make the second attack. But he didn't expect that this person could retreat in the air. This was many times more difficult than moving in the air. At least with his strength, he could not do this. The ninja of the Japanese Empire was chasing, and Yang Qindong was retreating. The two of them were in a stalemate. Seeing this scene, Qiu Vi breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, he also accelerated his pace. He wanted to catch up and then give a fatal blow to the ninja of the Japanese Empire. Qiu Vi was still running forward with all his strength. There were 6 Longwei beside him. They were also chasing with all their strength. They wanted to save the 6th young master. However, the third sword light that followed completely disrupted their plans. No one knew when the third ninja appeared, but he successfully blocked Qiu Vi's group of 7. Not only that, when he suddenly appeared, he also injured 2 Longwei who were trying to catch up to Yang Qindong. The appearance of the third ninja of the Japanese Empire was like the appearance of a dangerous mountain pass. He blocked Qiu Vi's group who wanted to save them. This was equivalent to cutting off all of Yang Qindong's support. 3 special ninjas. This was the strongest lineup of assassins under the Ashikaga Yoshimasa organization. Except for the captain and the boss, Matsumoto Kazuma, who didn't appear, the other 3 all appeared. The first one to attack was Kitamura, the second one to attack Yang Qindong was the strongest of the 3, and the last one to block Qiu Vi's group was Suzuki Yui. The 3 of them worked together and appeared without any warning. Even if they wanted to assassinate Ashikaga Yoshimasa, they had at least a 70% chance of success. And that was under the condition that the other party had a tight defense. Not to mention that Yang Qindong only had a dozen people around him. In their opinion, their target was dead for sure. Yang Qindong kept dodging. He looked a little embarrassed, but he always managed to dodge the sharp sword at the last moment. This was the real Yang Qindong. Maybe because his dodging posture wasn't very good, or maybe because the plan was going very smoothly, no one noticed why they still haven't killed the target after so long. The three special ninjas were completely immersed in the joy of being able to make a great contribution. On the other hand, Yang Qindong looked very flustered from the beginning to the end, but if one observed carefully, one would notice that he didn't counterattack at all. All of his actions looked very flustered, but it was also very strange. For example, why didn't he rush forward when he saw Junko being assassinated? Why did he just stand there? For example, why didn't he counterattack when he was being assassinated? Was he really only dodging? According to human instinct, he should at least draw his sword and fight back. Yang Qindong didn't do anything. He just kept dodging and looking around. Yes, Yang Qindong was using this opportunity to observe everything around him. Before he could confirm whether there were only 3 assassins or not, and whether there were other backup plans, he wouldn't act rashly. The reason was that he didn't want to alert the enemy. This was where Yang Qindong's confidence came from. He had already touched the threshold of the supreme power realm. That was the reason why he still walked out of the military camp with Junko, even though he knew that Ashikaga Yoshimasa would probably do the same to him after he sent someone to assassinate Junko. Some methods were not only used by him, others could also learn and use them. In order not to let the officers under his command become the target of Ashikaga Yoshimasa's anger, Yang Qindong stepped forward bravely and used himself as the bait. Everything was as he expected. The appearance of the 3 special ninjas was satisfactory. Otherwise, Yang Qindong would really have to worry about the safety of the low-level officers. Now that the assassins had appeared, what he needed to do was to determine whether there were other enemies around. With his 5 senses, which had already touched the threshold of a grandmaster, it was easy for him to get a clear picture of the situation nearby. After confirming that he did not sense any new auras, he was basically certain that only the 3 killers had come. Haha. Yang Qindong, who was constantly dodging, suddenly smiled. This Ashikaga Yoshimasa was still very confident. Did he really think that only 3 ninjas could hurt him? At this moment, he was laughing at the opponent's arrogance and presumption. But this kind of smile was seen by blowing Ishida, who was holding a ninja sword, and it gave him a bad feeling. Instinctively, he shouted, "Baka!" "Fuck you," Yang Qindong quickly replied. Then, without knowing when, a gun appeared in his right hand. He even made a shooting gesture towards Yoshimasa. Although he didn't know how powerful this gun was, Yoshimasa already knew the power of firearms from the information he received from the 5-star army. When he saw the gun being taken out, his body instinctively stopped, and he even made a dodging gesture. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Yang Qindong fired a shot into the sky. Immediately, a red light appeared. It was the appearance of a signal flare. Yang Qindong took this opportunity to send out a signal of his location. He knew that there were people who wanted to harm him. So how could he not be prepared? There were 200 people from the Wolf Fong Special Forces waiting near Shaoyin Mountain, but because they were afraid of being discovered by the assassins, they hid far away. The signal was sent out in order to prevent these 3 people from escaping. Since they wanted to kill him, then they should be prepared to be killed. Of course, Yang Qindong wouldn't really kill them because they were far more convincing dead than alive. This was also one of the reasons why Yang Qindong didn't take out his gun to kill them. He wanted to keep them alive. The other reason was that Yang Qindong also wanted to test his own understanding of martial arts. Although he had beta, Persei, and long way to practice, they were still his own people. He couldn't be ruthless. How could he have such an opportunity? It would be more satisfying to have a good enemy as a target. He put the signal flare back on his waist. At this moment, Yang Qindong's aura changed. When he looked at Yoshimasa, there was a hint of mockery in his eyes. He even made a beckoning gesture with his finger. His provocation was very strong. 8. Seeing that Yang Qindong was ignoring him, Yoshimasa was angry. After cursing, he suddenly rushed forward. At this moment, he perfectly used the advantage of a ninja's speed. He covered a distance of 3 or 4 meters in one step, instantly closing the distance between him and Yang Qindong. Yoshimasa was fast enough, but Yang Qindong's reaction was even faster. His body had already changed when the other party cursed. When the sword pierced through, it naturally pierced nothing. Then he felt a pain in his left shoulder and couldn't help but grimace. Yang Qindong finally started to fight back. He patted Yoshimasa's shoulder. It seemed that he didn't use much strength, just a light pat, but Yoshimasa knew that his shoulder was broken. This is the difference between hard skills and internal strength. It can also be said to be the difference between external strength and internal strength. At Yang Qindong's level, although he couldn't use a branch as a sword to fight against all things, he could still turn his strength into internal strength and hit it out. Chapter 1090. Fortunately, he was a ninja and a very good one at that. He could endure pain that normal people couldn't, so he didn't cry out in pain. Instead, he endured the pain and continued to swing his sword. He wanted to kill Yang Qindong to avenge his broken arm. Even when he was in perfect condition, he couldn't hurt Yang Qindong at all. Not to mention, he was suffering from internal injuries, so it was impossible for him to hurt Yang Qindong. Next, Yang Qindong kept drawing his sword, thrusting his sword, swinging his sword, chopping his sword, and picking up his sword. Yang Qindong just waited until the moment when the sword light appeared and casually dodged it. From time to time, he would hit forward. But even so, after more than a dozen rounds, his whole body was trembling. This wasn't because of anger, but because of pain. After 7 to 8 hits, each hit would leave a heavy injury on his body. And this was because Yang Qindong didn't want to kill and wanted to keep him alive. Otherwise, even if he had 3 lives, he wouldn't be able to survive. Clang! The ninja's sword fell to the ground without any warning when Yang Qindong hit his right arm again. As the sword fell to the ground, Blow Wishy also knelt on the ground. At this moment, he felt that his whole body was falling apart. Every movement required a lot of effort and strength. In this state, even if he was facing a normal 5-star army soldier, let alone Yang Qindong, who was half a grandmaster, he wouldn't be able to kill him. Blow Wishy knelt on the ground, and Yang Qindong didn't even look at him. He walked past him with an indifferent expression and headed towards Yui Suzuki, who was blocking Cho Wu and the others. Although Yu Suzuki's back was facing Yang Qindong most of the time, his ninja's sharp senses allowed him to observe the situation from time to time. So much time had passed. He really wanted to angrily scold Blowing Rock. Why hadn't they taken care of the target yet? What were they doing? But before he could say anything, Haishiya suddenly knelt on the ground. Yang Qindong also walked past him. Yui Suzuki knew that Kurosawa did not complete the mission, but he did not have the time to think about the reasons. A glimmer of light appeared in his eyes. Upon closer inspection, there was even a hint of excitement because the target was walking towards him. Didn't that mean that his opportunity to make a great contribution had arrived? Among the 3 people who came, Blowing Stone's strength was the strongest. But in truth, the 3 of them were on par with each other in terms of strength. Ishida was just more proficient in quick attacks, while Yu Suzuki was more proficient in strength. Ninjas were particular about sudden appearance, killing with 1 blow, and then leaving in a huff. The requirement for strength had never been high, which was why Suzuki was slightly weaker than the others. But he had never thought of it that way. In his mind, having more strength would give him an advantage in many aspects. For example, if both of them attacked with the same sword, the one with more strength would obviously have the advantage. This was also the reason why he did not want to submit to Blowing Stone. He always thought that if he chose to be a samurai, he would definitely be much stronger than Blowing Stone. But in some things, just thinking was not enough. One needed to prove everything with facts. In Yui Suzuki's eyes, Yang Qindong's approach was an opportunity to prove herself. He suppressed the excitement in his heart and acted as if he was still fighting with Chiu-Vi and the others. He acted as if he did not notice Yang Qindong's approach and left his back to him. Closer. 10 steps, 8 steps, 5 steps, 3 steps. When he was only 3 steps away, Yu Suzuki suddenly turned around and slashed with his ninja sword. Under the support of his powerful strength, the sound of wind whistling could be heard. At this moment, Yu Suzuki was confident that even if there was a tree in front of him, he would be able to cut it in half. "You're courting death." Yu Suzuki suddenly gave up on him and the others and attacked the 6th young master, causing Chiu-Vi and the other Longwei members to shout. They shouted and slashed at Yu Suzuki's back. Yu Suzuki acted as if he did not hear them. In the eyes of a ninja, there was only the mission. As long as the assassination mission was completed, what was a little injury? On the contrary, it was a military medal that could be used to prove one's strength. With excitement in his eyes, the ninja sword slashed across Yang Qindong's neck. At this moment, Yu Suzuki's face revealed a smile. It was the excitement and joy of completing the mission. But more than that, it was the joy of proving one's strength. The sword flashed and slashed across Yang Qindong's neck. This scene also shocked Chiu-Vi and the others who were rushing over. The 6th young master had actually been injured under their protection right under their noses. Based on this alone, their lives as dragon guards had come to an end. From now on, not only would they no longer be envied by others, but they would also have to live with shame for the rest of their lives. This was something they did not want to see. At this moment, they only wanted to kill Yu Suzuki. So what if they had to pay with their lives? At least, they could use their deaths to prove their loyalty. Several blades slashed at him from behind, and Yu Suzuki was already prepared to dodge. After all, he was a ninja and his reaction speed had always been very fast. But what happened next made him stop for a moment. And it was this moment that gave Chiu-Vi and the others the opportunity to attack, causing him to suffer several blade wounds and fall to the ground. There was only one reason why Yu Suzuki stood there like a fool. After the sword was slashed, there was no resistance and no blood was spilled. It was as if he had slashed through the air, but he clearly saw the sword slashing through the target's throat. What the hell is going on? No one knows and no one will know. What is the limit of Yang Qindong's speed right now? Because his speed was too fast, there was actually an afterimage. That ninja sword was just an afterimage. But because it was too fast, it actually gave people a very real feeling. Yang Qindong, who used his extreme speed, appeared next to Yu Suzuki, but he didn't take the opportunity to attack. Chiu-Vi and the other Longwei ninjas had already attacked. He already knew the result. Leave him alive. After saying those words, Yang Qindong had already leaped over here and quickly rushed towards the last ninja, who was standing at the entrance of the North Village. Kitamura's strength wasn't bad. Not only did he injure Kobayashi, but he also forced the other 2 Longwei ninjas to retreat. If Beta Persei hadn't been pestering him, he would have already left this place. With only Beta Persei as his opponent, Kitamura was very relaxed. Speaking of which, in terms of overall strength, Kitamura wasn't Beta Persei's opponent. For example, when it comes to fighting on the battlefield, they weren't even on the same level. In other words, Beta Persei's Kung Fu was an open strategy, focused on opening and closing. On the other hand, Kitamura's Kung Fu was a conspiracy, focused on speed, accuracy, and surprise attacks. When a hero meets an assassin, it's easy to imagine that the former would be very aggrieved, having a feeling of powerlessness. Beta Persei was like that. Although he was already using a lot of strength, every time he was about to press down on his opponent, Bei Cuenco only needed to increase his speed to dodge nimbly and return to safety. He could even pose a certain threat to Yang Air. On the battlefield, Yang Air had followed Yang Qindong to this day. Everywhere he passed, there were piles of bones of the enemy. All of them were pointed at by the weapons, and no one could stop them. But when facing an opponent like Kitamura, who didn't want to fight him head-on, he felt powerless. This made him unable to help but yell to vent his grievances. While Beta Persei was yelling and shouting like he was going crazy, Kitamura continued to fight while paying attention to the changes in the battlefield. Especially when his target was killed, Chuashirshir knelt on the ground without any warning. Then, after a brief moment of shock, Yu Suzuki was injured by Longwei and subdued on the ground. All of these changes happened so quickly that it was completely beyond Kitamura's imagination. Just as he was wondering what was going on, Yang Qindong, dressed in green, was already 5 meters in front of him. Although there was still a distance of 5 meters between them, the North Village entrance could already feel the presence of danger from the pressure. After 2 of his companions were subdued, he already knew that this mission was impossible to complete. What he needed to do now was to leave this place immediately. Puff! A white smoke suddenly appeared without warning, and then Kitamura, who was standing between Yang Qindong and Beta Persei, suddenly disappeared into thin air. It was as if no one had ever been there. The scene in front of him shocked Beta Persei. He had only heard about ninjas before, but this was the first time he saw what happened. On the other hand, Yang Qindong's face didn't change at all. As early as in his previous life, in order to complete various missions, he had fought with ninjas more than once. But at that time, technology was extremely advanced, and the ninja's advantage had gradually declined. A single sentence could decide everything. Can a person be faster than a bullet? Especially with all kinds of surveillance equipment, all kinds of special glasses, it was very difficult to hide in thin air. But now, the ninja's method of hiding using light and sound waves was very powerful. At least, Yang Qindong needed some time to find the other party's trace. Fortunately, it was daytime, and there wasn't much cover. With his extraordinary experience, Yang Qindong quickly locked on to the direction. Suddenly, he pointed to a big tree 10 meters away from the spring and said, "He's there, hiding in the tree." Chapter 1091. This shout attracted everyone's attention. Soon, everyone found a faint shadow on the big tree. If it wasn't Bei Goku who had just disappeared, who else could it be? Bei Cun did not expect that he would still be discovered, even though he had used everything he could and even increased his speed. At this moment, he suddenly had a bad feeling. He was afraid that not only would he fail to kill his target this time, but he might also be in danger. Knowing that both of his companions had been captured, he had to leave. At least, he had to report what happened here to the higher-ups so that they could make some preparations. Therefore, he had to leave. Since his position had been exposed, Bei Cun did not need to use any fancy means to hide his whereabouts. He simply jumped from this tree to a nearby tree, looking like a gibbon. "Chase, we can't let him escape." Beta Persei saw that Bei Cun wanted to escape. He angrily took out a Type 54 pistol from his waist and prepared to lead his men into the dense forest. No need. Beta Persei, who was about to leave, was suddenly stopped by someone. He was just about to curse when he saw that the person who stopped him was Yang Qindong. He stood there obediently. Then the young master's voice clearly entered his ears. "Don't worry, he can't run away." Yang Qindong said this because he had discovered something. With his powerful 5 senses, he had already heard footsteps coming from the dense forest, and there was more than one. Although those people were very careful, Yang Qindong still caught them. Since they could appear here at this time, they should not be enemies. Otherwise, they would have attacked them instead of choosing to be defeated one by one. There was only one possibility left, and that was the Langius Special Forces who had rushed here after seeing the signal flare. There were 200 Langius Special Forces just to deal with a ninja in the forest where they were best at. Yang Qindong really had no reason to think that they could not catch him. What he had to do now was to stand there and wait for news. In less than a quarter of an hour, the sound of footsteps came from the dense forest. A burly man appeared in the lead. It was King Kong of the Wolf Fong. "Greetings, Lu Bai. We have already caught him. He is very fast and agile." Without any other choice, the team members could only use the crossbow. Both of his legs were pierced through. As soon as King Kong appeared, he gave a simple report of the situation. Then, 2 members of the team threw North Village entrance, who had been shot in both legs, onto the ground like dragging a dead dog. Seeing that the last killer was taken down, Yang Qindong was very happy. "Thank you for your hard work, brothers. Now do one more thing. Pull out all their molars immediately." Yang Qindong, who has long known the habits of ninjas, will never give the 3 people a chance to commit suicide. They are of great use. Their role was no less than that of an army of thousands. How could he let them die so easily? Yu Suzuki and the other 2 did have poison hidden in their mouths, which was used to commit suicide at the most critical moment. But because the matter hasn't reached the final moment, they still want to take the opportunity to see if they can escape. So no one thought of committing suicide. Who would have thought that Yang Qindong, who was clear about all of this, would make the first move and take away their last chance to commit suicide? At this point, the 3 of them had become meat on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. The interrogation was handed over to Beta Persei. Yang Qindong took Junko's hand and returned to the 5-star Army's camp under the protection of Chiu Vi and the others. The 3 special ninjas were all captured by Yang Qindong, especially after Shaolin, who was in the crowd, recognized the identities of the 3 people. The extent of the 6th young master's strength had become a mystery. Everyone only knows that if it's a one-on-one battle, no one can last more than 3 rounds against the 6th young master, and most people can't even last 1 round. They are also proud to have such a powerful leader. These days, Matsumoto Kazuma's life has not been good. He has undergone inhuman ninja training since he was a child. Not only is his physical fitness excellent, but even his mentality is also very good. But for some reason, he has been suffering from insomnia these days. This is something that has never happened to him since he was a child. The 3 people in the North Village haven't sent back a message until now. Especially recently, they haven't sent back a single message. So he can't help but think about it. If he didn't consider the strength of the 3 people in the North Village, he would have thought that something happened to them. Will something really happen to them? After the problem appeared, Matsumoto Kazuma asked himself in his heart, "It shouldn't be." The thought just appeared in his mind, but it was rejected by himself. The strength of these 3 people is comparable to his own. It's because he knows them too well that Matsumoto Kazuma doesn't believe that anyone can control them. Not to mention that the 3 people are very powerful special ninjas. If it's not the right time, they will never easily make a move. With the ability of the 3 of them, it's impossible for all of them to be caught. At least 1 or 2 of them can escape. It's because he knows them too well that Matsumoto Kazuma is so confident. If it's another commander, they may have already prepared for the worst. Matsumoto Kazuma has his own ideas and persistence, and even the pride of a ninja in his heart. As a parasitic ninja who has always been attached to other forces, he has always had an idea. That is, he hopes that one day he can break all the shackles, no longer rely on others, and he can stand on his own and stand alone. For this goal, I don't know how many seniors have worked hard and struggled for a lifetime, but in the end, no one has been able to do it. All of this has a lot to do with the special training of ninja. To become a qualified ninja, it takes not only hard work and effort, but also a mentality that requires one to be undistracted, not to be disturbed by everything, and to be able to devote oneself to it wholeheartedly. Only in this way can a truly excellent ninja be trained. It's just that people eat grains. How can they have no feelings and don't come into contact with worldly things? Just like ninjas, although their physical fitness is different from ordinary people, they still have to eat after all. They are not ascetics in order to ensure physical coordination and absolute health. Their requirements for food will only be higher. Otherwise, how can a malnourished person be trained for nearly 8 hours a day? And all of this requires money, a lot of money. And training ninja also requires a process. and for some people, this process is still very long. This has led to the fact that this is an industry with a large investment and slow results, and there are very few people who are interested in it. There are even fewer people who are interested and have enough financial strength and patience. This is also the reason why, with the financial resources of the Supreme General Ashikaga Yoshimasa, he can only train 4 special ninjas, and the entire Japanese Empire only has 5 special ninjas. It's really because the external conditions don't allow it, and it's not that ninjas don't have to do their best. It is precisely because the number of suitable ninjas is too small that they have become even weaker, so that they don't have enough confidence to speak in the face of any forces. In order to change this situation, Matsumoto Kazuma took the initiative to take the task of assassinating Yang Qindong in order to make a bang, so that everyone can see the power of their ninja. But it was apparent that things weren't going as smoothly as he imagined. In order to save the ninja's face, Matsumoto Kazuma didn't dare to tell the Supreme General about the loss of contact with the Kitamura trio. In the face of Ashikaga Yoshimasa's urging several times, he didn't tell the truth. Perhaps because there is no progress, or perhaps because Matsumoto Kazuma's lack of confidence was seen in the eyes of Ashikaga Yoshimasa. Gradually he stopped putting his hope in the ninja and didn't do anything to urge him. But the more this is the case, the more uncomfortable Matsumoto Kazuma's mood became. He felt a sense of abandonment. When a person is no longer valued by others and becomes a dispensable existence, all his dreams and ambitions will only get further and further away from the day of realization. So much so that Matsumoto Fujima became somewhat decadent, giving up the principles of ninja and drinking all day long. On this day, Matsumoto Kazuma woke up drunk. Slowly opening his eyes, he found that he fell asleep in the hall. He couldn't help but shake his head with a wry smile. When did he become like this? Where did the previous righteous Matsumoto Kazuma go? He wanted to cheer up again, but when he thought of the Kitamura trio in his mind, there was no news, not even a little bit of news. The feeling of wanting to cheer up disappeared. If something really happened to them, would he be able to lead the ninjas to stand up again? If even the strongest ninja can't complete the task, then what hope does this organization have? What's the point of standing in this world? Shaking his head, Matsumoto Kazuma took a bottle of wine and poured it into his mouth. He wanted to use alcohol to comfort his wounded soul. Although the degree of wine in the Japanese Empire is not high, for him who has no experience in drinking, it is enough to numb his nerves. After pouring 1/3 of the bottle of wine into his mouth, Matsumoto Kazuma felt a slightly spicy taste. The corner of his mouth revealed a satisfied smile. He really didn't know what else to do besides drinking. Clang! The loud sound of the door opening aroused Matsumoto Kazuma's vigilance. This is the ninja courtyard. According to the ninja's behavior, even the lowest genin walks quietly. It is absolutely impossible to make such a big noise when opening the door. This noise also attracted Matsumoto Kazuma's attention. Just when he was about to get up and go outside to see what is going on, the sound of sword clashing entered his ears, and then the door of his bedroom was pushed open and 4 ninjas rushed in. Kuin Matsumoto, we are surrounded. It is the Supreme General's samurai team. Some of our companions have died in the courtyard. You should leave quickly. Chapter 1092. The Great General's Samurai Team. Matsumoto Kazuma's face changed. They are the elites of the Great General's Guard. How many people have tried to assassinate Ashikaga Yoshimasa, but they have been saved by this team, and they have become the same trump card as the ninja team. It's just that the former is more suitable for defense, and the ninja are more suitable for assassination. Originally, these 2 lines don't intersect, one in the light and the other in the dark. But why would these samurai attack the ninja? Even if he disappointed the great general, he shouldn't send people to deal with him, right? What exactly had happened that he didn't know about? The doubts on Matsumoto Kazuma's face were seen in the eyes of the 4 jonins, and they became even more anxious. The samurai's movements were very fast, coupled with their preparation. The ninja's team had already suffered a lot. If they don't escape in time, I'm afraid they won't even have the chance to leave this place. One of the jonins was so anxious that he ignored Matsumoto Kazuma, who was still immersed in his fantasy, and took the initiative to step forward and grabbed his arm and said, "Kuin Matsumoto, leave here first, as long as you are still alive. There is still hope for our ninja." Yes, yes. The other 3 jonins also made a sound and tried their best to cooperate. "No, I won't go. I want to have a good talk with them. Why do they want to attack our ninja? Does the great general know about this?" Matsumoto Kazuma's temper rose. He thought that the samurai team's actions were private because ninja and samurai are usually opposite, and the 2 sides have not seen eye to eye for a long time. He has reason to suspect that these actions are to vent their anger because as long as the great general is not stupid, he should know that there is no benefit in killing him, and on the contrary, it will make the opponent laugh secretly. This kind of thing that hurts the family and makes the enemy happy. Matsumoto Kazuma doesn't believe that the great general will do it, so he went out to reason with the people who came. For this reason, he even broke away from the outstretched arm of the jonin on the side, pushed open the bedroom door, and walked out. The courtyard that belongs to the ninja has long been designated as a training base, so the area here is not small. At this moment, the people here have long been fighting in a group. There are ninja corpses everywhere, and the air has long been filled with a pungent smell of blood. When Matsumoto Fuma walked out, he saw this scene. He also happened to see a samurai holding a bushido and slashing at a genin. Out of instinct to protect his companions, he jumped out and kicked the samurai's wrist, forcing him to retreat, and then he shouted, "What are you doing? Who gave you the right to attack? Ha ha ha! Kuin Matsumoto, are you finally willing to come out?" The short silence was broken by a burst of laughter. A man who is slightly taller than the ordinary people of the Japanese Empire walked out of the crowd. He is 178 meters tall and has a strong aura. His appearance is very dazzling for the people who are less than 1.7 meters tall. The man walked out in large strides, and when Matsumoto Kazuma saw him, he couldn't help but stare at him and said, "Yamaguchi-kun, you came in person?" Yamaguchi Fukada, Ninja General Ashikaga Yoshimasa's bodyguard, and also the captain of the samurai team. He is one of the most trusted people of the Ninja General. Oftentimes, his appearance and actions could directly represent the Supreme General, which was why Matsumoto Fuma was so surprised. Looking at Yamaguchi Fukada, Matsumoto Kazuma couldn't help but think, is all of this really the Ninja General's idea? Yes, I came in person. Since Kuin Matsumoto is here, can you ask your ninjas to stop first? I also know that you must have a lot of questions, so you can come with me to see the Ninja General. And if you have any questions, you can talk to him face to face. Yamaguchi Fukada said with a very reasonable appearance, and his words were full of consideration for the other party. These words moved Matsumoto Kazuma. Although he is very sad about the hundreds of ninjas who have fallen to the ground and died, he wants to know the reason. So after hearing these words, he bowed deeply to Yamaguchi Fukada, who is more than 10 meters away, and said, "Thank you, Yamagu-in. Since that is the case, I am willing to go with you to see the Ninja General and make things clear." "Kuin Matsumoto, you can't." The 4 jonin behind him shouted anxiously. Since the samurai has already made a move on the ninjas, this is originally the result of a fight to the death. How can they easily believe the other party? Enough. Don't say any more. I believe in Yamaguchi-kun's character. I am willing to go with them to see the Ninja General. Matsumoto Kazuma waved his hand. In order to show his sincerity, he also took out his ninja sword and handed it to a jonin behind him, then turned around to show that he has no more weapons. Matsumoto Kazuma's sincerity is already full, but Yamaguchi Fukada on the opposite side seems to be not satisfied. Instead, he said, "And the medicine bottle on your body. Take it out. I don't want you to go to the Ninja General and play tricks." The so-called medicine bottle refers to the auxiliary substance used by ninjas to perform ecstasy jutsu and other means. Just like a cloud of smoke, the ninja will disappear. This is the function of the medicine bottle. The thing inside can make light have a certain chemical reaction for a while, thus achieving the goal of helping them escape. Since they are old rivals, how can Yamaguchi Fukada not know what other things Matsumoto Kazuma has? So he said, "Okay, I will hand them all over." Matsumoto Kazuma was very cooperative, took out a porcelain bottle from his body, and handed it to the person holding the sword behind him. Then he looked at Yamaguchi Fukada in the distance and said, "Now there's no problem, right? You can take me to see the ninja general." "Okay, Kuin Matsumoto, please." Seeing the other party so cooperative, Yamaguchi Fukada nodded with satisfaction, then made a sideways movement to lead the way. "Please," Matsumoto Kazuma said so very politely, then strode forward, straight toward Yamaguchi Fukada's position. His action also attracted the attention of the ninjas present. On the surface, Matsumoto Kazuma looked relaxed, but with every step he took, he was ready to make a move at any time. What he was thinking was not as simple as what he showed on the surface. Even at this moment, his whole body was tense. With a smile on his face, Yamaguchi Fukada let Matsumoto Kazuma approach, until the distance between the two sides was only 1 meter. He still didn't have any intention to make a move. Instead, he turned around and really wanted to take him to see the ninja general. "All samurai, listen to my order. Without orders, you are not allowed to attack anyone." "Yes." The hundreds of samurai who had arrived all nodded in agreement. Then, one by one, they held their samurai swords in their hands. "Thank you." Seeing that Yamaguchi Fukada was so trustworthy, Matsumoto Kazuma also breathed a sigh of relief. Then he also shouted loudly, "All ninjas, listen to my order. Without orders, you are not allowed to attack anyone." "Yes." Hundreds of ninjas also responded in unison. Each put down the katana in their hands, and some of the injured ninjas simply sat on the ground, then called their companions to bandage their wounds. After Matsumoto Kazuma did this, he looked at Yamaguchi Fukada and said, "Yamaguchi-kun, I will have to trouble you to lead the way." "You are too polite, please. By the way, Kuin Matsumoto, do you know why the ninja general ordered you to be taught a lesson?" Yamaguchi Fukada asked with a meaningful smile on his face. Why? This was the question in his heart at this moment. Matsumoto Kazuma was really too curious. "Oh, I'll tell you." Yamaguchi Fukada stopped moving forward, turned around, approached Matsumoto Kazuma, and then looked like he wanted to whisper something. Cooperating with the other party, Matsumoto Kazuma also leaned his head over. He also wanted to hear what was going on. If he didn't solve this mystery, even if he saw the ninja general, he wouldn't know what to say. He leaned his head over, but because his head was lowered, he didn't notice the flash of pride in Yamaguchi Fukada's eyes. When the distance between the two people was infinitely close, suddenly there was a pain in his waist. At this moment, a katana was stabbed into Matsumoto Kazuma's waist, and blood quickly dripped down along the blade. Yamaguchi Fukada suddenly made a move, showing the Neon people's untrustworthiness, insidious and cunning. His men, who had already put down their katanas, also made a move. They didn't even need anyone to give the order. The sharp blades slashed at the ninjas who had already aimed at them. This sudden turn of events was out of everyone's expectations. Most of the ninjas were still sitting on the ground, or enjoying the help of their companions, but they were already killed by the katana. The situation instantly became one-sided. In just a few breaths, no less than dozens of ninjas were killed because they were unprepared. Why is this? Matsumoto Fujita covered the katana on his waist and stared at Yamaguchi Fujita in front of him with a pair of disbelieving eyes. Why? At this moment, Yamaguchi Fukada no longer had a smile on his face, but returned to a cold state and said, "Because of the incompetence of your ninjas, the assassination failed, and you were captured alive. Now the 5-star army has declared war on the Supreme General. Now their vanguard army is about to reach Ping and Beijing, and this place is about to fall into the hands of others. With such a big mistake, do you think the Supreme General will forgive you?" Why do you think this is? In a short period of time, Yamaguchi Fukada continuously threw out so many questions and truths, making Matsumoto Kazuma stand there. For a while he was at a loss. The assassination of the 3 ninjas at the north entrance of the village really failed. But why were they captured alive? Even if they couldn't escape, they should have died. Their teeth are highly poisonous. How could they be captured alive? Chapter 1093. After telling the answer, Yamaguchi Fukada looked at his old opponent Matsumoto Kazuma's painful expression and couldn't help but laugh proudly. This time he didn't only want his opponent's life, but he also wanted his opponent's despair. Only in this way can he be considered to have defeated his opponent. After laughing, Yamaguchi Fukada once again raised the butcher's knife in his hand. Looking at his appearance, it was clear that he wanted to continue to chop down and end his opponent's life. Kuin Matsumoto, quickly leave. A figure suddenly rushed over, and when the knife fell, it was chopped on the figure. Looking carefully, it was one of the 4 ninjas who persuaded Kuroda to leave. He used his body to block the knife, giving Matsumoto Kazuma a glimmer of hope to survive. The knife fell, but it didn't hit Matsumoto Kazuma's body. Yamaguchi Fukada's eyes showed a trace of anger. He pulled out the knife and slashed again, but he lost the opportunity to kill because the other 3 ninjas rushed over. 2 of them waved their swords to block the knife, and the other ninja carried the stunned Matsumoto Kazuma and jumped toward the courtyard. Obviously, he wanted to take him away from here. Want to leave? Yamaguchi Fukada's face didn't show any panic. Obviously, he was very familiar with ninjas, so he was already prepared. He smiled and waved his right hand. The moment he waved his hand, 200 shadows suddenly appeared around the courtyard. They were wearing samurai clothes, and they were holding strong bows and crossbows in their hands. Their standard and uniform movements proved that they were a well-trained army. When 200 shadows appeared, many ninjas' eyes showed a look of horror. Some people couldn't help but shout, "My God, Divine Archery Battalion!" The Divine Archery Battalion was composed of the best archers in the Japanese army. They not only have nearly 100% accuracy in archery, but also undergo strict physical training. According to the founder of this army, General Ashikaga Yoshimasa, this army must be able to use bows and arrows and use swords to kill the enemy. The requirements were too harsh, so it has been established for a long time, but the number of people has not been very sufficient, only 500. It became a trump card in the hands of the general, and he won't act rashly. What Kuroda didn't expect is that this time, in order to deal with ninjas, he actually dispatched 200 people. It seems that this time Kuroda is really angry, and he wants to destroy this ninja unit that he used to be proud of. When he saw that it was the Divine Archery Battalion, Matsumoto Kazuma, who had a knife in his stomach, stopped the idea of continuing to escape. Originally, he was injured, and it was difficult for him to move, so the chance of escaping was very slim. Now, there were fully prepared divine archers on the periphery. Doesn't this mean that the inescapable net has been set up, and even if he wanted to escape, there would be no chance for him to escape? Instead of being killed while escaping, it was better to stay and fight and die together with his brothers. At least he can gain a reputation for loyalty. Matsumoto Kazuma pulled back his hand and said to the jonin who was helping him to leave, "Forget it. There is no chance. It is better to fight with all our strength, and kill a few more people is equivalent to revenge for our brothers." The jonin didn't speak. At this moment, he didn't know what to say. Yes, since the Divine Archery Battalion has appeared, how can there be a chance for them to escape? Since he was going to die, he might as well go all out before he died. One was an injured special ninja, and the other was a jonin. The 2 were holding ninja swords back to back. They relied on each other, but at the same time, they also turned their backs to each other. They were ready to kill the enemy at any time. Matsumoto Kazuma stopped running, and Yamaguchi Fukada laughed proudly. Is this old opponent finally going to accept his fate? Does he really think that death will be so easy? No. He wants to watch this old opponent die step by step. Even if he dies, he won't let this old enemy die easily. Yamaguchi Fukada, who was laughing, showed a gloomy look on his face. After that, he made a gesture, and most of the 200 soldiers of the Divine Archery Battalion adjusted the angle and target of their arrows, leaving only 20 people to stare at Matsumoto Kazuma. Matsumoto Kazuma saw the excitement of the soldiers of the Divine Archery Battalion, and he had a bad feeling, so he exclaimed loudly, "No, don't." As if to confirm his guess, as soon as his shout fell, hundreds of arrows broke through the air and shot toward those ninjas who were desperately resisting in the courtyard. Originally, they were in a disadvantageous position. After being attacked suddenly and being schemed by Yamaguchi Fukada, the number of ninjas has sharply decreased, and only 1/3 of their strength was left. The arrival of this wave of arrows accelerated the process of their death. Especially in front of them, there were samurai who were entangled with them, so they couldn't do anything to dodge. Many ninjas were killed by the arrows. The archers of the Divine Archery Battalion were worthy of their title. Every arrow was shot with a very clear target, and they could bypass the samurai and hit the ninjas. They were either killed by an arrow in a vital part of their body or pierced into their arms or legs, reducing their mobility and agility. With just one wave of arrows, at least 50 ninjas died tragically on the ground, and dozens of others suffered different degrees of injuries. This made the situation worse for the ninjas, who were already in a bad situation, and even their resistance became weaker. "No, don't. I'll fight with you." Watching the ninjas he trained hard and his companions who have been with him for many years being shot one by one under his eyes, Matsumoto Fuma's eyes were red. As if they were about to spit out flames, he wanted to kill all the enemies. In anger, Matsumoto Kazuma completely ignored the knife wound on his abdomen. Even if he was injured, a special ninja was still a special ninja. Like a cold wind, he killed his way into the samurai who were showing off their might, and then stabbed his sword to the left and right. One by one, the samurai who were unprepared or who were prepared but had no power to fight back, became sheep in the lion's mouth, became the target, and were stabbed to death on the ground. Originally, he had a face full of laughter, imagining how painful it would be for Matsumoto Kazuma to watch his subordinates and companions die one by one. Suddenly, when he saw this person move and kill several of his subordinates, the smile on his face disappeared and was replaced by anxiety and anger. A person who was about to die, an ant that he could trample to death at any time, dared to resist. This was unacceptable. Yamaguchi Fukada roared, and then rushed toward Matsumoto Kazuma with his sword. At the same time, he didn't forget to make a shooting gesture toward the surrounding walls. The expressions of the 20-god Arrow Battalion and the Master Archers were also very ugly. Originally, they thought that Matsumoto Kazuma was already a fat piece of meat on the chopping board, and they could decide his life and death as they wished. But they didn't expect that he dared to resist, and in such a short time he even killed 2 samurai. This was simply a provocation to their archery skills. "Release the arrows." A captain couldn't help but shout in his heart, and the arrows of the 20 master archers also moved along with Matsumoto Kazuma's movements. The advantage of ninjas was their flexibility and the strangeness of their figure. When it came to face-to-face combat, they were not as good as samurai. This was also the reason why ninjas were always suppressed in a head-on battle. But when they were able to fully exert their advantages, like Matsumoto Kazuma now, who was constantly moving among the samurai like a civet, it was impossible to completely capture his figure. The archers finally found a chance to shoot a few arrows, but not only did most of them miss, but one arrow even hit a samurai's body, accidentally injuring one of their own. Matsumoto Kazuma's speed was so fast that it was beyond his usual level. He also saw that the wound on his lower abdomen was constantly dripping blood, and he knew that if this continued, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to live long, even if others didn't kill him. Since he knew that he was going to die, What was there to be afraid of? He just had to give it his all and kill as many people as he could. It could also be considered as an explanation to his brothers as a captain. At least if they could be together after death, he wouldn't be ashamed of anyone. Matsumoto Kazuma, who was close to madness, became synonymous with the Grim Reaper. Wherever he passed, samurai fell to the ground. Most people only saw a shadow appear, and then they felt a pain in their body and lost their senses forever. Because of Matsumoto Kazuma, the courtyard became more and more chaotic. Originally, it was only a one-sided battle, but now it became a situation where everyone could become prey. At this moment, on another high wall 500 meters away from the courtyard, a group of black-clothed men were lying there, as if they were a layer of black tiles on the roof of the courtyard. If it wasn't for someone speaking at this time, no one would be able to tell that everything in front of them was made of human bodies. "General, please save our comrades, and our captain, he's about to die." With an anxious expression, Chuishiki used his binoculars to see everything clearly, and finally couldn't hold it in and begged. At this moment, Chuishiki wasn't interested in asking what the binoculars in his hands were, or how it could close the distance between them. Right now, he only wanted the people around him to help and save Matsumoto Kazuma and his brothers. "That's right, General. Please act quickly. As long as you can save our captain and comrades, I'm willing to swear that I'll be loyal to Bugnam of Gojoseon for the rest of my life." Yu Suzuki also spoke. Compared to Chuishiki, he was willing to swear his loyalty. Other than Kitamura, who was still recovering from his leg injury, Yu Suzuki and Chuishiki, who hadn't fully recovered from their shoulder injuries, were also here. The reason why they were here was all because of Yang Qindong. Chapter 1094. The ambush at the foot of the mountain not only failed to kill Yang Qindong, but even Longwei, who was beside him, was not killed. Only 2 of them were slightly injured. In exchange, 2 of the special ninjas were injured and 1 was captured. In the end, all 3 of them were captured alive. After the 3 of them were captured, Yang Qindong first handed them over to Beta Persei. He believed that with the interrogation and torture methods he and Beta Persei had learned, it wouldn't take long for the 3 of them to suffer a fate worse than death. They would forever regret the moment when they had the idea to attack him. But things were always unexpected. Princess Junko suddenly came to his door. After there was no one else in the tent, she knelt on the ground in front of Yang Qindong's puzzled eyes. She knelt in front of her husband. "Madam, why are you doing this?" Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with doubts. He thought that he knew this student whom he had known for several years very well. But at this moment, he was also stunned by Junko's sudden action. "King." After hearing Yang Qindong's unique name, Junko slowly raised her head. "King, Junko begs you, don't kill those 3 people. They are the best talents of the Japanese Empire. They should be used by King, and they shouldn't die in silence like this." Junko actually wanted to save the 3 special ninjas, which was really beyond Yang Qindong's expectation. As far as he knew, when the emperor was still in power, these special ninjas gave him a lot of problems, and he didn't even know how many times they had opposed him. They were supposed to be enemies, so why would she plead for mercy for the other party? Yang Qindong's doubts were seen by Junko, and she actually smiled and said, "King, Junko really hates them, but it's even more clear that they are just following orders. Junko's real enemy is Ashikaga Yoshimasa. In order to achieve this goal, other people can be used and cooperated with." She even said something like making use of him. It can be seen that she was indeed standing on Yang Qindong's side, and she even forgot her identity as the princess of the Japanese Empire. These days, with Junko's understanding of the 5-star army gradually deepened, especially after seeing the bravery of the 1st Cavalry Division. Although she was unwilling, she had to make a judgment. The 5-star army was too strong. It was so strong that the disordered Japanese Empire couldn't stop it. If the Japanese Empire was truly unified in the hands of her father with a strong military base, she would still fight against him. But now the Neon people's minds were in chaos, and there was constant fighting among the higher-ups. More than half of their strength had been consumed, and now Neon was more fragile than ever. In the face of the powerful 5-star army, defeat was certain. It was just a matter of time. The result was already decided. Junko was a smart person. Since she was a little emperor, she had never done anything that went against the heavens. What she thought about was how to maximize the benefits, how to turn all the disadvantages into advantages. Even if she knew that the rise of the 5-star army was inevitable, how to preserve the strength of the Japanese empire became something she must consider. Although she didn't dare to have extravagant hopes of reviving her country, she didn't dare to imagine that even if Yang Qindong had become her man, as a person who was born in a country where women's rights weren't valued, she had such thoughts and awareness since she was a child. It didn't matter if she couldn't revive her country. She didn't dare to force it. What she wanted was to leave more seeds for the Japanese empire, leave more marks. At least, when people talked about it, the future generations would know that there was a Japanese empire in the past, and that was enough. To achieve this goal, the spread of ninjas was undoubtedly the key. In a sense, when people talked about ninjas, they would naturally mention the Japanese empire, and that was enough. In order to achieve this goal, the 3 special ninjas under the rock couldn't die. This was the reason why she came to see Yang Qindong, and she didn't hesitate to kneel down as soon as they met to achieve this goal. Junko opened her mouth to plead for mercy for the 3 special ninjas, which was somewhat beyond Yang Qindong's expectation. Confucius said that only villains and women were difficult to raise. One of the meanings was that women were often emotional creatures. Logic had little effect on them, and they were often more used to acting on their emotions. With this point in mind, Yang Qindong never thought that Junko would plead for mercy for any of Ashikaga Yoshimasa's subordinates. Even if the death of her father's family wasn't directly related to those people, there was always an indirect relationship. It would be good if she didn't come to beg him to kill all of them. How could she plead for mercy for them? Junko's abnormal behavior also attracted Yang Qindong's attention. He discovered that he had been underestimating this woman. She was really worthy of being born in the imperial family. Her behavior was really different from others. This move also successfully attracted Yang Qindong's attention. She was even willing to let go of her father's death. Such a woman really made people vigilant. "Madam Hachi, what are you doing? Do you want to use them for yourself?" Yang Qindong asked bluntly, without any probing. He directly spoke out his thoughts. When the words came out, Junko's face suddenly stiffened. She knew that her behavior was misunderstood. She also knew that once Yang Qindong had a bad opinion of her, she was afraid that she would never be happy. Even if it was for herself, she had to explain clearly. "My king, I don't want to use them for myself. Since I gave you my body, I have paid all my feelings. I just want to be the 8th madam, and I don't have any thoughts or desires. If my king doesn't believe me, you can send someone to send me away now. I promise that I won't complain." Junko raised her head and looked at Yang Qindong with a very firm look, expressing her feelings. The 2 of them stared at each other in this way. At this moment, Yang Qindong seemed to be able to see Junko's heart through her eyes. This scene lasted for about 3 or 4 breaths of time. Finally, Yang Qindong took the lead to turn his head to the side. He didn't want to doubt Junko. He also liked this lovely but ill-fated girl. Whether it was out of pity or affection, he didn't want to give up on her so easily. Therefore, he didn't want to guess her real thoughts. "Well, I believe you for the time being. Then tell me if you don't want to take them for your own use. What are you trying to do?" Yang Qindong asked. Facing this question, Junko was determined to be honest. She knew that there weren't many chances for her to explain. If she didn't seize this opportunity, she was afraid that she wouldn't have another chance to explain everything and tell her thoughts. "My king, Junko knows that this time the Japanese empire is doomed. Perhaps it won't be long before the Japanese Empire becomes a province under the five-star army. Speaking of this, the corner of Junko's mouth couldn't help but twitch slightly. After all, the motherland was about to be destroyed, no one would be happy. But when she thought about how her parents and brother died in the hands of her own people, she thought that even if the Japanese Empire was powerful, it wouldn't be able to escape the sharp sword of the five-star army. She quickly felt relieved and continued to say, "The Japanese Empire becoming a province under the five-star army is a good thing for the people. Junko is happy for them." "Oh, you really think so?" Yang Qindong suddenly interrupted and asked. For Junko, who had already become his 8th wife, Yang Qindong didn't want to force her. But today, since they had talked like this, some questions that were usually difficult to ask could be asked clearly. He hoped that, through today's conversation, they could completely eliminate the last barrier between them and become a truly selfless husband and wife. "Yes," Junko said with a very firm tone. "The Japanese Empire becoming a province under the five-star army is naturally a good thing for the people. They can forever avoid the flames of war and live a peaceful and happy life. This is of course a good thing. It's a good thing for the people, but for the higher-ups of the Japanese Empire, it's not necessarily a good thing," Yang Qindong said again. At the same time, he stared closely at Junko, wanting to see her true thoughts. "That's right, it's not a good thing for the higher-ups. But the royal family has been destroyed, and for Junko, there are no higher-ups. Now, Junko is not a princess, but a commoner, the 8th wife of the king, that's all. Since she wants to be a wife, why does she still care about the ninjas?" Yang Qindong didn't believe Junko easily. Especially this woman was a member of the royal family of the Japanese Empire. The shadow of the future was too big, and he didn't want the country that he worked so hard to build to be stolen by an outsider, even if that person was his wife. When it came to the main topic, Junko didn't have the slightest intention to hide and took the initiative to explain. "Junko just wants to leave a mark on the Japanese Empire, and at the same time, as a former princess, I want to do something for them. Besides, ninjas are a very strong force. In the past, when the emperor was still alive, he once said that ninjas have many branches, but because they can't unite together, they can't use their full strength. My king, if you want to conquer the world and create miracles in the end, wouldn't it be better to have as many strong helpers as possible? Since you can give a chance to the foreign cavalry on the grassland, why can't you give a chance to the ninjas?" Junko said all the words in the bottom of her heart, and then looked at Yang Qindong intently. The look in her eyes was very strong. It was obvious that she hoped that Yang Qindong would agree, so that she could do something for the Japanese Empire and live up to her identity as a princess. Even if one day she went to the ground to see her father, she would have something to explain. Yang Qindong didn't answer immediately, but constantly analyzed the pros and cons in his heart. No one knew better than Yang Qindong what the Japanese Empire's people were like. When you were strong, they would kneel down and lick your boots. When you were weak, they would find all kinds of excuses to bully you. Chapter 1095. Yang Qindong didn't like such national characteristics, so he only thought of one way to deal with the so-called ninjas, which was to eliminate them, completely eliminate them. As long as he killed all these ninjas, there would be no such title in the future. Only then could he rest assured and leave everything to his descendants. However, Junko's words were also not wrong. Why could he tolerate the grassland people joining the five-star army, but not the ninjas? Since he knew that the people of the Japanese Empire respected the strong. As long as he was strong enough, he didn't need to worry about them rebelling against him one day. If he was really worried, he could just get rid of them after he conquered the world. Yang Qindong felt that he was in the wrong when dealing with other people. But when it came to the Japanese Empire, he didn't think that there was anything he couldn't do. After a full quarter of an hour of silence, Yang Qindong didn't say anything. Junko was waiting on the side, just like a suspect in a court of law, waiting for the final verdict. Finally, Yang Qindong opened his mouth and looked at Junko. "I can agree to your request. But do you have a way to persuade them? This was equivalent to agreeing, so Junko was naturally happy. However, what she said next made Yang Qindong a little dumbfounded. My king, Junko doesn't know how to do it, but the omnipotent king will definitely think of a good way, right? There was no way to explain things, and all hope fell on himself. At this moment, Yang Qindong wanted to slap his forehead and sigh, but he didn't. As Junko said, he was the omnipotent king, of course. There was nothing that could be difficult for him. Well, if that's the case, I still need Madam's cooperation. You can do this. Yang Qindong quickly thought of a way. Although he couldn't guarantee that it would work, he didn't need these ninjas. With such a preconceived idea, it wasn't difficult to think of a plan. Yang Qindong's idea wasn't that brilliant, but it was very effective. First, he asked Junko to visit the 3 special ninjas as the princess of the Japanese Empire. She wanted to get closer to them and, at the same time, express her respect and love for them. During the contact, Junko represented Yang Qindong to express the importance of ninjas and promised to help them develop. After the implementation of the plan, sure enough, the performance of the 3 special ninjas was not as stubborn as before. As I said before, the growth process of a ninja is destined to not be able to distract their attention. They can't be too entangled with the secular world. They can only rely on other rich clans to grow up effectively. Considering that the training process is too long and requires more financial support, it effectively hinders the development of the ninja team. This was also the reason why they were under the control of Ashikaga Yoshimasa. Compared to the other forces, this general was very rich. He can only be regarded as very rich, but compared to Yang Qindong's wealth, he can't be compared to him. When Junko said that Bugnam of Gojoseon was willing to provide 5 million silver a year to support the training and development of the ninjas, the 3 were moved. With this money, they won't be disturbed by the secular world, and it won't be long before they can restore the glory of the ninja team. This was a proposal that they couldn't refuse. Of course, if they can be bought with money, then it would be too easy to deal with. In fact, it is precisely because they are not good at scheming, and it has been proven that people with distracting thoughts will not make any progress in their ninja training, so they're more honest and grateful than the average person. Considering that they have always received the kindness of the general, the 3 didn't immediately agree, but told Junko that they want to see Bugnam of Gojoseon before making a decision. This was within Yang Qindong's expectations. No matter how much a person dreamed, they had to learn to bow to reality. When Junko came and said that the 3 special ninjas wanted to see him, he didn't hesitate to agree. From the bottom of his heart, Yang Qindong is still very optimistic about the strength of the ninjas, because even in the future, the name of the ninjas is very famous, and they have become the spokesman of the military force of a certain island country. At that time, all kinds of high-tech weapons were rampant, but they still have such an influence it can be seen that their background and lethality are powerful. If they can be subdued, then needless to say, they will be a big help. As for whether the people of the Japanese Empire are trustworthy, he naturally has confidence. After subduing them, they will not have a chance to rebel. This confidence comes not only from the wealth he has now, but also from his martial strength that has almost reached the level of a grandmaster. Grandmaster. From ancient times to the present, it has been mentioned by many people, but there are not many people who have really reached this level of strength. Zhang Sanfeng, the founder of Wudong, is one person, and Yang Qindong undoubtedly has such strength. Even with the faint 5 stars in his body, he can go in and out at any time, which is to say he has reached a realm where he can disappear into thin air. This is very mysterious, and Yang Qindong doesn't know why such a thing happened. Unable to understand, he could only attribute all this to luck. Perhaps God hoped that there would be such a person who could spread the spirit of Huaxia and unify the world. Unfortunately, this person had chosen him. In the big tent, Yang Qindong saw the 3 special ninjas under the rock. Among them, Kitamura was carried in a single stretcher. The 2 crossbow wounds on his legs were far from being able to recover in a short time. Fortunately, The treatment was timely, and after careful treatment, there shouldn't be any sequelae. Accompanying Yang Qindong were Junko and Beta Persei. In the face of the three special ninjas, two of whom have recovered all their strength, Yang Qindong can still face them calmly. From this point, one can see the strong confidence in his heart. At the foot of Little Een Mountain, Yang Qindong originally had the ability to take down the three people in a short time. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't know whether the other party had a backup plan, he wouldn't have given the other party so many opportunities to show off. Yang Qindong was calm, and even his sitting posture was very relaxed. However, Beta Persei, who was standing beside him, was very nervous. His right hand was already on the sword, and he looked like he was ready to attack at any time. He knew very well that at such a close distance, if something happened, he was afraid that he wouldn't even have a chance to shoot. That being the case, he might as well draw his sword. Since he was following the young master and was responsible for his safety, Beta Persei was naturally very cautious. Outside the main tent, the two captains Chiu Vi and Dao Shao each led 50 of the most elite Longwei to guard the tent. If there was any movement in the tent, they would immediately rush in. In this way, Beta Persei's nervousness and Yang Qindong's relaxation formed sharp contrast. This was not only felt by Suzuki and Yui Suzuki, but also Junko, who didn't know any martial arts, could feel it. But she wasn't afraid at all because Yang Qindong was by her side and he was her king. As long as her king was there, she instinctively felt a strong sense of security. "You want to see me?" After a brief silence in the main tent, Yang Qindong was the first to break the silence. Yang Qindong spoke in fluent Japanese, which saved Junko the trouble of translating, and he could clearly express his attitude through his tone. "Yes, we want to talk to Bugnam of Gojoseon." Suzuki took on the role of the main negotiator. Speaking of which, his language skills weren't that great, but compared to Yui Suzuki, who was even more taciturn, he was much better. "Then let's talk. Tell me your conditions and requests." Yang Qindong nodded lightly and said casually, but in fact he was the one who took the initiative in the conversation. Yang Qindong intentionally gave the other party a chance to speak, and even put on a serious expression. Finally, after nearly an hour, the two sides finally reached an agreement under Yang Qindong's control. This content was also proposed by Yang Qindong. According to Suzuki's idea, they could join the 5-star army and complete some assassination missions that couldn't be exposed. But at the same time, they also put forward a request, which was the amount of rewards they could get for completing a mission and how much training money Yang Qindong would give them every year. Regarding this, Yang Qindong directly shook his head and rejected. He didn't want a cooperative relationship, but a pure relationship of superior and subordinate. In other words, these ninjas could only have one master, and what they wanted to do in the future would be decided by that person, and that person was no doubt himself. Suzuki naturally wouldn't agree to this, and even Yui Suzuki, who had been silent all this time, also shook her head. But then Yang Qindong proposed a plan, and the two of them made the final concession. "How about this? Let's make a bet. You promise this king one thing, and do it. Then this king will bet that your Grand Admiral will make a move on Matsumoto Kazuma. If he doesn't, then not only will I give you 5 million silver, I will also send you safely away, and we will be even. Of course, if you lose, I will still give you the 5 million silver, but from then on, you must treat me as your master and listen to my orders. How about it?" Yang Qindong smiled as he gave a suggestion. When he finished, Suzuki and Yui Suzuki's eyes widened. It was just a bet, and no matter who won or lost, they would still get 5 million silver. That was 5 million silver, and once they got it, it would be enough to support their development for several years. And the ninja team would also welcome a brand new change and a huge expansion. This kind of bet, as long as one wasn't an idiot, they wouldn't refuse. "Okay, we agree." Just by looking at each other, Yui Suzuki could tell that Yui Suzuki was just as tempted as he was, so he agreed on behalf of both of them. Chapter 1096. Just like that, the bet was made. Yang Qindong also told them what he wanted them to do, which was to publicly announce that their assassination attempt on Yang Qindong was ordered by the great general Ashikaga Yoshimasa, and announce it to the entire Japanese empire. Just this. Chuishiki asked in disbelief. Yes. Yang Qindong gave a very certain answer. Originally, the three of them came to assassinate Yang Qindong because of the great general's order, and they didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. Furthermore, they were all enemies, so wasn't it normal for them to try to kill each other? They were just telling the truth, so it wasn't a big deal. Therefore, they would be able to get 5 million in funding for the development of the ninjas. No matter how they looked at it, it was a profit. Chuishiki and Yui Suzuki didn't have any reason to refuse, so they agreed immediately. Seeing the two of them agree so quickly, Yang Qindong couldn't help but smirk. He knew that he wasn't far from conquering this powerful ninja force, because he knew what kind of consequences would come after this matter was announced to the world. Ashikaga Yoshimasa wasn't just a simple martial artist, he was also a political strategist. Even if some things were true, they couldn't be publicly announced. On this point, Yang Qindong and Ashikaga Yoshimasa had the same idea. Chuishiki and Yui Suzuki, on the other hand, were too naive, and they would eventually take the initiative to become Yang Qindong's subordinates. The facts also proved that Yang Qindong's idea was correct. When Chushi and Yui Suzuki suddenly appeared in public and pointed out the fact that they were ordered by the great general to assassinate Emperor Wu Nan of the Ming dynasty. Unfortunately, they didn't succeed. The Lu 4th Division and the Lu 7th Division, who had already arrived at Neon, cooperated with each other and launched an attack on the nearby Pinyin capital from the Sanyang Sek's Bomo area. The 100mm mortars that had been prepared beforehand were fired like raindrops, and they instantly destroyed the first line of defense set up by the great general. The 30,000 Japanese army didn't even see the shadow of the 5-star army, and thousands of people were killed or injured, and then they hurriedly retreated. When the news reached Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who was still occupying the flat well field in the Hokuriku, he was furious. Seeing that the largest resistance force in the country was about to be annihilated, the sudden change in the situation in the south caught him off guard. According to the report of the scouts, the 5-star army's attack is very fierce, especially their artillery. How can he defend against an enemy that he can't even see? Under this situation, not only will the 50,000 Japanese Empire's garrison not be able to stop the 5-star army's attack, but the Japanese Empire's capital, Pinyin Beijing, will also be lost. And all of this was caused by the words of the ninja, which directly tore up the agreement between the two sides. At this moment, the great general hated the ninja to the core. At this time, the samurai captain Yamaguchi Fukada stood up and said that the ninja should be taught a lesson and let others know what the consequences of betraying the great general are. Regarding this, Ashikaga Yoshimasa also nodded in agreement. He also needed a way to vent his anger, and Matsumoto Kazuma was undoubtedly the vent. That's why Yamaguchi Fukada appeared in the ninja compound with 200 elite samurai and Matsumoto Fuma. That's why the ninjas resisted and Matsumoto Fuma went all out. Yang Qindong had long expected that Ashikaga Yoshimasa wouldn't tolerate the betrayal of his subordinates, so he arranged for Tai, Hu, and Baizhua, the two captains of Wolf Fong and Ghost Shadow, to sneak into Pinyin Beijing to rescue Matsumoto Kazuma. According to the information obtained from the intelligence department, Matsumoto Kazuma was different from the 3 special ninjas under the rock. This person had some tricks up his sleeve. If this kind of person was used well, it would naturally save a lot of effort, but if it wasn't used well, he would become a poisonous snake that could bite at any time. Then, how to subdue Matsumoto Kazuma would require some brains. At least it wouldn't be as simple as dealing with the 3 special ninjas under the rock. This was the reason why Taihu and Baizhua didn't immediately act when they saw the samurai make a move. These 2 captains weren't in a hurry because they had already received orders from the 6th young master. However, Suzuki and Hei Ishikaga couldn't do it. Seeing their commander Matsumoto Kazuma fighting with his life on the line and bleeding profusely, they couldn't bear it and kept begging Tai-Hu and Hei Ishikaga. They even swore an oath to be loyal to Bugnam of Gojoseon for generations. Whether it was Suzuki or Hei Ishikaga, they didn't expect that they would lose the bet. The assassination was originally the Supreme General's order, and they were just executing it. In any case, they were already enemies, so it wasn't a big deal to tell the truth. They really didn't think that Ashikaga Yoshimasa would make a move on Matsumoto Kazuma because of this. Isn't this kind of internal strife destroying one's own strength and raising the prestige of others? But regardless of whether they could think it through or not, it really happened. Now, they didn't have time to think too much. They just wanted to save Matsumoto Kazuma and save more ninjas. Matsumoto Kazuma was already an arrow at the end of its flight, and he was fighting with all his life's potential. Tai-Hu and Baizuen naturally saw this scene clearly. After hearing Hei Ishikaga's words of loyalty and thinking that they had completed the 6th young master's mission, they finally decided to stop watching and make a move. After all, they still have a mission to save Matsumoto Kazuma and more ninjas. Otherwise, if they die, the meaning of their presence here will be a lot smaller. Sniper, aim at the target and prepare to shoot. Langya, prepare to engage the enemy in close combat and at the same time prepare the medicine. The two captains prepared to shoot at the same time. In the courtyard, Matsumoto Kazuma was still desperately trying to stab with his sword because the wound on his abdomen was bleeding a lot. He knew that he was going to die here today. Knowing that he was going to die, he wasn't so afraid. He just wanted to kill a few more people before he died, and it can be regarded as revenge for his brothers. Yamaguchi Fukada was watching from the side. He didn't choose to fight with Matsumoto Kazuma. In his view, a dying man is still likely to have great potential. What he needs to do is to wait for the other side to continue to consume his strength, and when he completely has no power to resist, he will kill him to show his strength. Yamaguchi Fukada didn't make a move, which created enough opportunity for Iron Tiger and the others to save Matsumoto Kazuma. In the mainland, more and more ninjas died, and when the situation was about to be settled, suddenly on the roof of the courtyard, several archers tilted their bodies and rolled down from the courtyard wall. The sudden scene made many people very puzzled. What made them even more puzzled was that in just a few breaths of time, close to 10 more master archers threw down the bows that they relied on for survival and laid flat on the roof. No matter how others called out to them, they didn't respond at all. This is clearly the symptom of a person dying. For a time, the other archers also felt that they were in danger. The snipers in the dark continued to shoot, but in front of the archers who were on guard, they were no longer as accurate as before. Everyone was a long-range fighter, and they had a natural sense of danger. After several archers dodged the bullets, they finally found that the situation was not right. Not good. There are assassins in the dark, and they are very likely to be using weapons similar to firearms. After the captain of the archers dodged a fatal shot, he saw a small hole in the place where he was originally standing, and immediately said with a nervous face, hide in a safe place." The captain of the team finally spoke, and more than 100 archers hurriedly dodged in all directions, each looking for a safe place. "We've been discovered. Let's just rush in." Captain Baez was said with some reluctance, but archers were archers, and that kind of perception of danger was innate. He didn't expect to be able to eliminate all of them. As long as they could scare them or even make them retreat, they would be able to save most of the ninjas. Under the protection of the Wolf Fong members, the snipers of the Ghost Shadow continued to approach the courtyard, and from time to time, they would fire a shot. Most of them couldn't hit anyone, but the deterrent effect was still very effective. After the silencer was removed, when the gunshots began to sound from time to time, the archers began to retreat. The sudden appearance of the Ghost Shadow and Wolf Fong members also caught the samurai by surprise. The cunning Yamaguchi Fukada saw more and more mysterious people appear, and after taking the lives of several of his samurai from a distance, he knew that this was not a place to stay for long. Looking at Matsumoto Kazuma, who was still waving his sword and overdrawing his life, Yamaguchi Fukada finally didn't take the risk to make a move. In his eyes, Matsumoto Kazuma had lost so much blood. Even if no one did anything to him, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. So why take the risk? He immediately waved his hand and led the samurai to retreat, leaving this mess to Tai Hu and Bai Zua, who were rushing here. The samurai and the archers retreated very quickly, and the ninja courtyard quickly returned to its previous tranquility. The only difference was that this place was filled with the smell of blood. Even Tai Hu and Bai Zua, who were accustomed to this kind of scene, couldn't help but sniffle when they arrived. Okay, hurry up and clean up the battlefield, and bring back those who are still breathing for treatment. In a very short time, Tai Hu adapted to the smell here, and then he began to issue orders. Less than 100 ninjas, including Matsumoto Kazuma, were either supported by their companions or directly on the prepared stretchers, and were moved out of the courtyard. The main force of the 5-star army was still on the way to Ping in Beijing, and they met Tai Hu and the others. Yang Qindong also had the opportunity to personally see Matsumoto Kazuma, who was lying on the stretcher with a pale face. Chapter 1097. As soon as they saw Yang Qindong, Chuishi, and Yui Suzuki knelt on the ground. They had already heard from Tai Hu and Bai Zua that this kind of person who needed treatment due to excessive bleeding could only be treated by the 6th young master and his designated medical team. Although they didn't know what method would be used, they knew that it would cost a lot. The ninjas weren't completely accepted by the 5-star army yet, and they didn't know if the 6th young master would care about them or not. At this moment, they could only kneel and beg for mercy, hoping that Bugnam of Gojoseon would help. Their request was naturally accepted, since Yang Qindong was determined to subdue the ninjas for his own use. How could he watch something happen to Matsumoto Kazuma, a core member of the ninjas? Come, send him to the field hospital. Tell them what I said. No matter the cost, they must save him. The first Longwei's Captain Chiu V hurriedly nodded and led his men to take over the stretcher. Chuishi and Yui Suzuki were left behind. They looked at Yang Qindong with gratitude and knelt on the ground again. The person was sent away for treatment, but most of the ninjas didn't think that Matsumoto Kazuma could be saved. They saw with their own eyes how much blood was flowing out of his body, and how pale and ugly his complexion was. Under their old thinking, they believed that a person's blood was limited. Since so much had been lost, no matter what methods they used, they would not be able to reverse the situation. Didn't they hear Bugnam of Gojoseon say that they must do their best to save him? Didn't he say that he would definitely be cured? There were a lot of ninjas who thought this, and the number was not small. When Chuishi heard these words, he couldn't help but stare back angrily. You have to believe in Bugnam of Gojoseon, and you have to believe that Kuin Matsumoto has the strongest will in the world. He will definitely be able to survive. Although he said this, in fact, Chuishi didn't believe that Matsumoto Kazuma would really be fine. He was just doing his best and leaving the rest to fate. For the whole afternoon, nearly 100 ninjas rested in several large tents arranged for them. They were all extremely quiet. This was related to the boring life they had since childhood, and they were also worried about Matsumoto Kazuma's health. For a long time, Matsumoto Kazuma was their leader. No matter what happened, everyone was used to listening to his orders. Now that there was a problem, it was no wonder that everyone was so sad. Some people didn't even know how to face the future. Time passed little by little. The sky gradually darkened, and finally there was movement outside the big tent. Ninja's perception is very strong. As soon as they heard footsteps coming, they walked out of the big tent without anyone calling them. With the help of the torches next to the barracks, they saw that the person who came was a seemingly high-level guard who followed Bugnam of Gojoseon during the day. The person who came was tall, and his voice was like thunder. After noticing that all the ninjas, even some of the wounded who were covered with gauze, involuntarily walked out of the big tent, he nodded with satisfaction. This saved him the trouble of notifying them one by one. "Hello everyone, my name is Beta Persei. I am Bugnam of Gojosian's personal guard. I am here on behalf of Bugnam of Gojosian to inform you that Matsumoto Kazuma has passed the critical period and is fine." "Where? Really?" After a moment, the ninjas who reacted suddenly became lively. Many of them had a look of joy on their faces, and some of them showed a look of disbelief. For example, Bloishida was one of them. "Beta Persei, Kuin, is Kuin Matsumoto really okay?" "Yes." Beta Persei replied with a very positive tone. "Then can we go and see him?" Yui Suzuki asked anxiously. "Yes, but after all, his body hasn't fully recovered, so we can't send too many people at once. You can send 2 representatives to see him first." Beta Persei also knew that if he didn't let people see him, not many people would believe him. The 2 representatives were naturally Bloishida and Suzuki-yu. They represented nearly 100 ninjas and followed Beta Persei to the temporary battlefield hospital. There, they saw Matsumoto Kazuma lying on the bed. His face had recovered a lot of color, but he could only lie down. Kuin Matsumoto, Bloishida, and Suzuki-yu almost cried at the same time and said with a somewhat choked voice, "You're here." After seeing his 2 companions, Matsumoto Kazuma forced a smile and then wanted to sit up on the bed, but he inadvertently pulled the wound on his abdomen that was just stitched, and he couldn't help but grin. All of this was seen by Bloishida and Suzuki-yu, and they quickly stepped forward to help him. Looking at all of this, Beta Persei knew that it was time for him to leave. He said that the visiting time can't be too long, and the patient still needs to rest. Then he left first. When only Matsumoto Kazuma and the other 2 were left in the tent, it suddenly became very quiet. The 3 of them closed their eyes and did the same thing. This wasn't praying, but sensing. They were sensing the surrounding environment to decide if they could talk about something here. Soon, the 3 of them opened their eyes and nodded to each other. After ensuring that the environment was safe, Matsumoto Kazuma, who was lying on the bed, was the first to ask, "Why am I here? Why are you here?" Because of the lag in the news, Matsumoto Kazuma still didn't know that the 3 of them failed their mission and were captured by Yang Qindong, and were used as an excuse to deal with the Supreme Generalissimo. Right now, Matsumoto Kazuma's mind was still stuck in the scene where he fought with the samurai. "Kuin Matsumoto, the situation is like this." Bloishida, who was quite eloquent, told him how the 3 of them failed their mission and were captured, and how they reached an agreement with Yang Qindong. Finally, they went to the ninja compound with the elites of the 5-star army to rescue the 3 of them. Matsumoto Kazuma listened carefully at first, but when he heard that the 3 of them were captured, he was surprised. When he heard that he reached an agreement with Bugnam of Gojosian, he was worried that they would be used. After hearing everything, he finally understood why the Supreme Generalissimo sent Yamaguchi Fukada to attack him with elite, samurai, and 200 sharpshooters. Matsumoto Kazuma was in charge of the external affairs of the ninja compound, so his understanding of the human heart was much better than Bloishida and Yui Suzuki. Yang Qindong's bet was a conspiracy in his eyes, and it was proven that all of this was beneficial to the development of the 5-star army. Obviously, Matsumoto Kazuma knew everything, but he couldn't say anything. Blame them? He didn't kill the captives, but he respected them and gave them a chance to choose. That was already very benevolent, at least from Matsumoto Kazuma's point of view. If he was in their shoes, he wouldn't let the person who tried to assassinate him live. Also, Yang Qindong only made a simple plan, and the one who really fell for it was the Supreme Generalissimo. If he didn't think of himself as a cautious person, if he trusted him a little more, this kind of fratricide wouldn't have happened. From this matter, it can be seen that everyone didn't trust each other. Under such a foundation, even if the fratricide didn't happen today, it might happen in the future. Sai, With a long sigh, Matsumoto Kazuma knew that he lost and lost completely. Now that the other party saved his life and gave him a new lease of life, he didn't seem to have any choice in the future. One was his old boss, who wanted to kill him. The other was his new boss, who not only saved his life, but also gave him a place to live and a new hope. What choice to make? He should know how to make a decision. But before that, he still hoped to know more about Bugnam of Gojosian, so that he can get more benefits for himself in the future. Blow Ishida, Suzuki-kun, you've all seen Bugnam of Gojosian. Tell me about your impression and understanding of him. In the main tent 2 miles away, Beta Persei stood in front of Yang Qindong and handed over the task. Then he asked with a puzzled look, "Young master, why don't you let me stay and listen to what they say? I'm sure I won't be discovered by them." "Oh, do you think that ninja's perception is just for show? I can guarantee that before you get close to the big tent, you will be discovered," Yang Qindong said with a smile. Ninjas are best at sneaky assassinations. The feeling that they can appear at any time is very annoying, making people unable to guard against them. The reason is their perception of the environment. It is precisely because of this instinct that they can avoid all kinds of warnings and appear next to the target without making a sound. Being looked down upon by the young master, Beta Persei was a little unconvinced. "Young master, so we just let them be? What if they don't abide by the rules and don't do it according to the bet and want to leave or assassinate you again?" "They won't." Yang Qindong's answer was firm. "In this world, I'm afraid that there are few people who know more about the ninja industry than him. It is precisely because they do what they say, because of this simplicity, that they can persist in training in a boring environment and thus become a terrifying existence. On the contrary, if they have other ideas in their hearts and there are too many conspiracy elements, then they won't have their current achievements." Because of this understanding, Yang Qindong believes that the date of his conversation with Matsumoto Kazuma is not far away. Early the next morning, as soon as Yang Qindong had breakfast, Captain Chiu V came to the main tent and reported to him that Matsumoto Kazuma wanted to meet. "Is it that urgent?" Yang Qindong smiled after listening, then said to Chiu V, "Let's go, accompany me to patrol inside and outside the barracks." Chapter 1098. Yang Qindong wanted to see Matsumoto Kazuma, but he couldn't be in a hurry. "I can't just go and see you when you want to see me. Wouldn't that be too tasteless?" He was now the great Ming prince. How high was his status? How could anyone see him just because they wanted to? Besides, at this time the appropriate control will also play a positive role in conquering the ninja team, so why not? Yang Qindong was not in a hurry, but the one who was anxious was Matsumoto Kazuma. Seeing that it was already noon, and he had even finished eating lunch, but he still didn't see Yang Qindong's figure, he became somewhat anxious. Originally, he was anxious to see Yang Qindong because he wanted to express his attitude. That was, he was willing to accept his loss. Even if he wasn't present when the bet was made, he was still willing to accept everything. But as compensation, he also had to put forward some conditions to fight for more benefits for the ninja team. Matsumoto Kazuma was very confident that Yang Qindong would agree to some of his conditions. This could be seen from the fact that the other party didn't kill the 3 ninjas under the rock. Instead, he arranged for elite forces. Now, he even put in a lot of effort to save him. Since the other party valued him so much, if he didn't take the opportunity to put forward some conditions, wouldn't it be a waste of this opportunity? But after not seeing Yang Qindong's figure for a long time, his originally confident heart became somewhat uncertain. That is ninja really that important? At least for the leader of the 5-star army, the Ming dynasty's Bugnam of Gojosian, is it really that important? Until the afternoon passed, Matsumoto Kazuma's original confidence was worn down by more than half. When it was time to eat dinner, there was still no news. He even began to doubt his own importance. It was also at this time that dense footsteps came from outside the big tent. Then the curtain of the big tent opened from the outside. A tall figure took the lead to enter, bringing a lot of pressure to Matsumoto Kazuma. The first to enter was Beta Persei. He first looked around, then looked at Matsumoto Kazuma lying on the bed. After he didn't find anything unusual, he nodded with satisfaction. He turned around and respectfully said, "Young master, everything is normal." After his voice fell, Yang Qindong appeared in front of Matsumoto Kazuma with a confident smile. Although he has heard about him for a long time, this is the first time he saw King Wunan of Daimyong. Matsumoto Kazuma carefully observed the other party and found that the other party has a trace of a superior aura. The most important thing is that the confidence in his body seems to be able to infect others, giving people a sense of omnipotence. "Matsumoto, don't you know how to kneel when you see Bugnam of Gojoseon?" Beta Persei noticed that this person only stared at the young master at this moment and didn't do anything else. He suddenly shouted angrily, and this shout also pulled the other party's thoughts back to reality. "Matsumoto, Kazuma greets Bugnam of Gojoseon." As he spoke, he wanted to get out of bed and salute. "Forget it. You still have injuries on your body. Just sit and talk." Yang Qindong casually waved his arm, but it was this movement that seemed to have some kind of magical power, making Matsumoto Kazuma, who wanted to get up, stop and involuntarily say, "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me. I saved you because I don't want to see a talent fall. Also, this king's time is limited. I only have the time for an incense stick to burn to listen to you. I have other military affairs to attend to in a while." Yang Qindong sat down in front of the chair that Beta Persei had brought over. Chiu V behind him also took out an incense stick, lit it, and stuck it in the ground, using facts to tell some people that they really only had the time for an incense stick to burn. Such anxiety and such an attitude. For a moment, Matsumoto Kazuma, who had a stomach full of words, suddenly didn't know what to say. He wanted to say too much, and it was far from being able to express clearly in an incense stick's time. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to play a very important role. If he can't explain his importance, then how can he make conditions? After waiting for a whole day, Matsumoto Kazuma really thought that Yang Qindong was very busy. If he missed today's negotiation, who knows when the next negotiation will be? He and his ninjas can't just wait like this. I have to give in. The facts made Matsumoto Kazuma quickly make a decision. Since time is limited, he can only seize the time to make demands. In order to reach an agreement in a limited time, he has to constantly give in and give up benefits. Bugnam of Gojoseon, Chuishiki-kun, and Suzuki-kun said that you are willing to support the development and growth of our ninja training team, right? With a hint of probing tone, he said. Although this was originally a fact, he had seen many people who reneged on their debts. Not to mention that if Yang Qindong admitted it, then it would be a large expenditure of 5 million silver coins. That's right. Matsumoto Kazuma still wanted to probe, but Yang Qindong had already openly admitted it. After getting an accurate answer, Matsumoto Kazuma was very happy in his heart. Once there is an injection of 5 million silver coins, it is equivalent to having a great financial power. Whether it is high-intensity training or recruiting suitable seedlings, it will not be a problem. But just as this smile hung on his face, Yang Qindong also opened his mouth and said, "The promised 5 million silver coins will not be given to you all at once. In the beginning, I will give you 1 million silver coins, and then it will be paid in 5 batches within 3 years. During this period, if you complete the task given by this king, there will be additional rewards. But if the task is not completed well, or if you are disobedient, then your silver coins will be deducted. Do you agree?" This. He didn't expect there to be such an additional condition, but Chuishiki-kun didn't say anything before. After being stunned for a moment, Matsumoto Kazuma felt relieved. Now he was at the chopping block, and he was the meat on the chopping block. What should he do? Shouldn't it be up to him? At least he didn't deny the 5 million silver coins. This result already made him very satisfied. The time it takes for a stick of incense to burn quickly passed. Yang Chendong did as he said and got up to leave, leaving Matsumoto Kazuma alone on the bed. He was still thinking about what Yang Chendong had said: arrange a suitable training ground, provide food and gold. Of course, the food will be converted into silver coins and deducted from the 5 million silver coins. In addition, when there is a task to be given, the ninja team must carry it out to the letter. If they succeed, there will be rewards, and if they fail, there will be punishment. All of this was different from what Matsumoto Kazuma had imagined. He wanted to fight for a year without missions to restore the ninja team's strength, but now it seems that he didn't have the opportunity to raise the conditions, and he didn't have the ability to do so. Fortunately, Yang Chendong did what he said. Before he left hundreds of banknotes, which added up to exactly 1 million silver coins. Holding these in his hands, Matsumoto Kazuma felt a sense of security in his heart. Yang Chendong put aside the matter of the ninja team. He had done what he should do, and the next development would depend on the ability of the other party. Now his main energy was focused on conquering Ping and Beijing. He wanted to take advantage of the time when Ashikaga Yoshimasa was focusing on conquering the Northern Land Road. Ping and Beijing was not only a simple region, it was also the capital of the Japanese Empire and the political and economic center of the country. Of course, at this time, the Japanese Empire didn't have its own unique culture. Once this place was conquered, it would represent the orthodoxy in a way. In addition, Junko was the princess of the Japanese Empire. When the time came, there would be a lot of people responding to her call, and it would be much easier to deal with Ashikaga Yoshimasa. Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who was being thought of, did not look good. Standing in front of him was Yamaguchi Fukada, whose face was full of shame. This time he didn't complete the task well, and didn't bring back Matsumoto Kazuma's body. Afraid of being punished, he kept his head down after entering the room, and didn't dare to raise it again. Get out 20 strokes of the cane. A cold voice came out of Ashikaga Yoshimasa's mouth. Yamaguchi Fukada breathed a sigh of relief in his heart and turned to receive his punishment without saying a word. He knew the general's temper. If things went wrong, it was normal for him to be beheaded. This time, 20 strokes of the cane was the lowest punishment. This was not because Ashikaga Yoshimasa had a good temper, but because he was in need of manpower, especially since the ninja team could no longer be used, and the samurai team was abandoned. The number of cards in his hand would only decrease. Yamaguchi Fukada had already rolled out, but Yoshimasa's face still didn't look too good. Originally, he wanted to capture Matsumoto Fujina alive, or at least get his body, and then hand it over to the Pentastar army to get himself out of this matter. But now, it seemed that this trump card was gone. He slowly raised his head and fell on the other person in the room. Nin Shijuin, without Matsumoto Kazuma, the negotiation won't be a big problem, right? Nin Shijuin was sitting in the room. When he learned that the 5-star army suddenly tore up the agreement and invaded Ping and Beijing, he urgently summoned this person and wanted to reopen the negotiation and stabilize the 5-star army first. But who would have thought that the bargaining chip in his hand was gone, and all hope could only be placed on Nin Shijuin's silver tongue? Nin Shijuin, who was asked this question, frowned first. At this moment, he was a little angry in his heart. He had spent a lot of effort to suppress the 5-star army through negotiations. He had even paid the price of the entire Shanyang path for this. But now, everything was destroyed because of the general's actions. Since he was the one who destroyed the negotiation first, it was no wonder that the 5-star army suddenly attacked. Under the current situation, it was very difficult to stop the 5-star army. Ashikaga Yoshimasa did not immediately answer this question. He knew that Nin Shijuin had an idea, so he immediately said, Yamaguchi-kun just said that Matsumoto Kazuma lost too much blood, and I'm afraid that he is already dead. It shouldn't be too difficult to put all the blame on a dead person. Chapter 1099. Sigh. Ning Shidaxiu sighed in his heart. He knew that he couldn't avoid this anymore, so he finally said, "If Matsumoto Kazuma is really dead, then this matter can be discussed, but we still have to pay a price. If there are no benefits, then I'm afraid that the 5-star army won't be able to negotiate." "They want benefits. Just give it to them." Ashikaga Yoshimasa became excited. Then he strode to the map on the side. After pondering for a moment, he pointed at the Shanin Road area and said, "Give this area to the 5-star army. This kind of benefit should be able to stop their army from advancing." "What? Give the entire Shanin Road to them?" This time, it was Ning Shidoxu's turn to be shocked. It must be known that in the entire Japanese Empire, there were only 7 districts other than Ping and Beijing. They already gave one to them before, and the 5-star army took down another one. Now that they were giving another one, didn't that mean that they had already taken over half of the Japanese Empire's land? Looking at Ning Shidoxu's shocked expression, Ashikaga Yoshimasa smiled with satisfaction. This was the effect he wanted. Presumably, King Unan of Daimyong would be as shocked as Ning Shidoxu was right now. "Yes, give it to them." "Hee, I'm generous, right?" Ashikaga Yoshimasa laughed. He didn't care about Ning Shidoxu's shock at all. Very quickly, he gave a reasonable explanation. "Right now, our main goal is to destroy the flat well field. As long as he dies, there will be no resistance in the country. At that time, it will be time for us to go back and deal with the 5-star army. Before that, we need peace. Besides, is the Shanin Road really that easy to take? There are dozens of big and small forces there. There are more than 200,000 soldiers there than the 5-star army. If they want to take it down, it won't be something that can be done overnight." Ningshi Duishio finally understood what the great general meant. He let out a sigh of relief and nodded at the same time. He was really afraid that the great general was afraid of the 5-star army and wanted to give up all the benefits. Since he already had a plan, he only needed to execute it. With such a big dish like the Shanin path in front of him, he believed that no one would be able to resist the temptation. "All right, please rest assured, great general. Leave everything to me." 3 days later, Ningshi Duishio arrived at the 5-star army's tent. This was the second time he came here, so he was very familiar with the place. When he saw Yang Qindong, he first saluted, then explained, and finally threw out the bait. Regarding the assassination, Ningshi Duishio naturally said that all of this was the personal behavior of the ninjas. He and the great general did know about it, but in any case, this incident caused losses and shock to the Bugnam of Gojoseon. As compensation, and to show the friendly relationship between the two sides, Ningshi Duishio expressed on behalf of the great general that he was willing to give up the Shanin Road to the 5-star army as compensation. Another large area of the Shanin Road was given to him just like that. Yang Qindong felt a little surprised, but then he understood that this wasn't giving him benefits. It was clearly setting a trap for him. Does he really think that he is a 3-year-old child who can be easily fooled? After Ningshi Duishio finished speaking, he kept staring at Yang Qindong. He wanted to see what his first reaction would be to make the most correct judgment. In order not to let the other party down, Yang Qindong deliberately pretended to be very interested and greedy. There was even a hint of eagerness in his voice. Is the great general really willing to give the Shanin Road to the 5-star army? Of course. The great general values the friendship between the Bugnam of Gojoseon. Seeing that Yang Qindong seemed to have fallen into his trap, Ningshi Duishio was happy in his heart, and at the same time he replied with a very positive tone. "Well, thank you very much, great general, but I don't know if this matter can be announced to the world. This can also express the deep friendship between us and the great general." Yang Qindong smiled and made a small request. Since he was going to put on a show, of course he had to go all the way. Ningshi Duishio thought that Yang Qindong had fallen into his trap, so he didn't suspect anything and simply agreed. He also said that he would send the document personally written by the great general to the 5-star army's barracks in 7 days at the latest. It was just a handwritten document, but it actually needed 7 days. Ningxi Duoxio's intention to use this opportunity to stall for time was obvious. But Yang Qindong didn't have the intention to expose him. He also needed time to make some preparations. Ningxi Duoxio left very satisfied. He didn't know that only half a day after he left, a small team walked out of the 5-star army. They left the barracks and went straight in the direction of the Shanin Road. The person leading the team was the director of the intelligence bureau in the Japanese Empire. Guanxing was following Yang Qindong's orders. This time he was going to see the Japanese Empire's Shanin Road's General Uehara Toda. As the largest military force in the Shanin Road, Uehara Toda had 80,000 soldiers. Such a force could be considered an extremely powerful force, even among the ranks of generals. Based on his understanding of the Shanin Road's terrain and environment, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was the local snake. Normally, Uehara Toda and the great general Ashikaga Yoshimasa didn't interfere with each other's business. When it came to some big matters, the two sides would cooperate to a limited extent. It was precisely because the great general didn't see him as an enemy that he had to deal with immediately that Uehara Toda's days were really carefree. No matter how the Japanese Empire's civil war was, even if Baiming and Bugnam of Gojoseon wanted to get a share of the pie, he still wasn't worried at all. He just sat there and watched the situation change, as if he had nothing to do with it. In a war, very few people could really stay out of it. Uehara Toda also knew that he had to make a move, but when to choose the right time and how to do it to maximize the benefits. This was what he was looking for. To sum it up, he was waiting for the right price. Sure enough, Uehara Toda, who hadn't made a move until now, would receive all kinds of gifts from the great general from time to time. Gold, silver, treasures, beautiful women, and at the same time it was also to appease him, hoping that he wouldn't use this opportunity to cause trouble. He fully understood Ashikaga Yoshimasa's intentions. This Uehara Toda really did things according to the rules. The civil war had been going on for almost half a year, but he hadn't sent a single soldier to the battlefield. He was very good at being a spectator, watching the situation unfold. On this day, Uehara Toda, who was drinking and enjoying a rare peaceful time in his great general's residence, welcomed a special guest, the 5-star Army's messenger Guanxing, regarding the 5-star Army. Uehara Toda's feelings were very conflicted. The reason he was able to obtain all kinds of benefits from the current chaotic situation was because of the 5-star Army's sudden intervention. From this point of view, he should thank them. But on the other hand, the 5-star Army was still an outsider, and no matter how the Japanese Empire fought, it was still meat in the pot. As a great general of the Japanese Empire, of course, he didn't want to see other people come to his country and take advantage of it. With this kind of love and hate, Uehara Toda hesitated for a moment, thinking about how powerful the 5-star Army was, especially their firearms. He finally decided to meet the other party. If the other party really had a request, as long as it wasn't too excessive, he wouldn't mind agreeing. It was better than provoking a powerful opponent for no reason. In the main hall, Uehara Toda received Guanxing. As soon as they met, he had a smile on his face and showed a very warm appearance. While inviting Guanxing to sit down, he also personally poured a cup of sake for him. This kind of reception, if it was someone else, would really be moved. In Guanxing's eyes, his evaluation of Uehara Toda had to be a bit higher. A man who knew when to bow and submit wasn't afraid of villains, but he was afraid of hypocrites. This person will probably be a stumbling block on the path of the 5-star Army in the future. Guanxing, who made a preliminary impression in his heart, smiled and took the sake. His mouth was full of thanks, and the guest and the host gave a very harmonious feeling for a while. After drinking several cups of sake, the relationship between the two sides seemed to be a lot closer, and Guanxing finally talked about business. And when he opened his mouth, he exploded with a bomb. Uehara Toda, do you know that a disaster is about to befall you? Uehara Toda, who was also observing Guanxing and guessing the purpose of the other party's visit, heard this, and his face froze. But soon he chuckled and said, "Esteemed envoy, aren't you being a little alarmist? How could there be an imminent disaster?" "What, doesn't the general know?" Guan Xing, who had already thought of all kinds of possible responses, pretended to be surprised and asked with a confident look. "Know what?" Uehara Toda, who was completely driven by the rhythm, had to ask aloud. "It seems that the general really doesn't know. Sigh, seeing that we are chatting so well, then I will tell the general. It won't be long before the Yamen Road will be owned by the 5-star army. At that time, I am afraid that the general will lose everything he has." As if he was stating a fact, Guan Xing shook his head as he spoke. Huh. Uehara Toda's face was a bit unfriendly, and he stared at Guan Xing and said, "What? Does the 5-star army want to send troops to occupy the Yamen Road?" "Occupy? What do you mean by that?" Guan Xing asked with a puzzled expression. "What? Didn't you say that this place will soon be owned by the 5-star army? Then what are you doing if you don't want to occupy it?" "Humph. If that's the case and you're here to declare war, then I'll accept it. However, the 80,000 troops under my command and the hundreds of thousands of people from other forces are not to be trifled with. The Shanin Road belongs to us Neon people, and no one else is allowed to touch it." When he said the last sentence, Uehara Toda showed a domineering side, as if he was not afraid of war, nor was he afraid of the 5-star army. Uehara Toda's fearless performance was seen by Guan Xing. This was the result he had expected, so he exclaimed, "What does the general mean? The 5-star army never meant to be the general's enemy. All of this is because the great General Ashikaga Yoshimasa promised our Bugnam of Gojoseon." Chapter 1100. Uehara Toda, who was about to continue to fight head-on and show his strong side to make the 5-star army fear him, suddenly heard Guan Xing's words. He was stunned for a moment, then he said with a confused expression, "Wait, what did you say just now? You said that everything was the Grand General's idea?" "Yes. It's like this." Guan Xing felt that the time was right, so he told Uehara Toda all the promises that Ninjashi Toda made after meeting Bugnam of Gojoseon. In the end, he said, "In a few days, the Grand General's handwritten document will be sent to Bugnam of Gojoseon. When the time comes, the Grand General will be able to see whether it's real or not. By the way, the Grand General's handwriting, I'm sure the Grand General can recognize it." These days, the two sides have been communicating a lot, and Uehara Toda certainly recognized Ashikaga Yoshimasa's handwriting. However, he did not care about these details. He was thinking about why the Grand General would betray him. Could it be that the Grand General wanted to sit on top of the mountain and watch the tigers fight like him? Uehara Toda's mind was in a mess. After Ninjashi Toda returned to the Hakariku Road and met with Ashikaga Yoshimasa, she told him about her meeting with Yang Qindong. "Grand General, as you expected, Bugnam of Gojoseon was very tempted. This pie is really big. Ha ha ha." At this moment, Ashikaga Yoshimasa was in a very good mood. He laughed and said, "There are no eternal enemies, and there are no eternal friends. Only interests are eternal. As long as Bugnam of Gojoseon is still a person, it's impossible for him not to be tempted. This is all within my expectations. Yes, the Grand General is mighty." Ninjashi Toda took the opportunity to flatter him. "Ha, good. You've done a good job. I'll reward you handsomely. However, there's one more thing I need you to do." Ashikaga Yoshimasa stopped laughing and spoke in a serious tone. "Please tell me, Grand General," Ninjashi Toda said with admiration. Ashikaga Yoshimasa said, "I'll write a letter. You can send it to the 5-star army's camp. At the same time, I'll also write a letter to Uehara Toda. I'll have to trouble you to make the trip personally." Ashikaga Yoshimasa was able to become the most powerful official in the Japanese Empire. He was even able to control the royal family. He was not only good at war, he was also good at scheming. Since the five-star army had been ignited, the next step was to add fuel to the fire of the Japanese army in the Shanin Road. He didn't want the five-star army to progress too smoothly. What he wanted to see was a scene where the two sides were entangled and mutually damaged. If he pointed the five-star army's forces at the Shanin area and reminded Uehara Toda to be prepared, there was a high possibility that the five-star army would be entangled in a battle. Once he dealt with the flat well field, which was the biggest opposition to him, it would be time for him to turn around and work with Uehara Toda to deal with the five-star army. To deal with foreign aggression, he must first deal with internal problems. This was also Ashikaga Yoshimasa's idea. As long as he destroyed the flat well field and drove away the five-star army, it would be time for him to deal with Uehara Toda and the others. At that time, he would become the emperor of the Japanese Empire. Everyone knew how to calculate, but it was obvious that Ashikaga Yoshimasa was not as good as Yang Qindong. His self-proclaimed masterpiece had long been seen through by others. Waiting for the letter that promised to give the Shanin area to the five-star army, Yang Qindong arranged for Longwei's second captain, Dao Shao, to lead a group of elites to the north. Inside the shogun's mansion, Nishitoshi also brought the second letter from the shogun and met the owner of the mansion, Uehara Toda. He was still very enthusiastic as he received Ningshi Duishio's group. Although he had Guan Hang's reminder, Uehara Toda did not intend to reject the guests before everything was clear. He wanted to stay out of it. As for how the five-star army and the shogun would fight, let them do as they pleased, as long as they did not drag him into it. Nishitoshi did not know that the messenger of the five-star army had already rushed over, and did not know that Uehara Toda already knew everything. He even took out the general's handwritten letter as if they were idiots. Then, with a face full of hatred, he talked about how domineering the five-star army was. He also said that the general was focusing all his efforts on dealing with Hirai Ida, so he really didn't have the energy to stop the five-star army. However, his heart was on General Uehara's side, and as long as they held off the five-star army for a while, the general would return and help him deal with the five-star army once he finished his work. If he did not hear Guan Hang's words, these words would be very believable. But after knowing everything, Uehara Toda would not be so easily fooled. The five-star army is indeed very overbearing. I am willing to listen to the shogun's orders and stall them here. But what? Seeing that they had succeeded, Nishitoshi asked in a very good mood. But before the army moves, the supplies have to go first. You have to give me some time to prepare. Uehara Toda purposely showed the look of a businessman. He was trying to bargain and gain some benefits for himself. Nishitoshi thought that he had seen through everything. As an opponent who would become his opponent sooner or later, he could not give him any benefits. He believed that once the five-star army really came, Uehara Toda would know what to do without him giving anything. So he did not make any promises, and instead acted as if he did not understand, saying that he would give Uehara Toda a few days to prepare before the battle. Nishitoshi was sent to the inn to rest, leaving Uehara Toda with a face full of anger. The other party did not even want to give him any money. Was he really going to commit suicide? At this moment, he was already leaning towards Guan Hang's words. A day later, Dao Shao came. Along with him was the document that Ashikaga Yoshimasa had taken the initiative to assign Shanin Road to the five-star army. Guan Hang was very happy when he saw this document. Haha, with this, Uehara Toda will not know what to do. How about this? I will go see him tomorrow morning. Captain Dao, you have been busy for a long time, so you should rest first. No need, we still have a mission. Where is Nishitoshi staying? Dao Shao said very energetically, without the slightest bit of fatigue from the long journey. Damon Inn, where Nishitoshi stayed. To be exact, this was Uehara Toda's property. Whenever a friend came, he would arrange for them to stay here. In Uehara Toda's territory, and in his inn, Nishitoshi never thought that he would be in any danger here. But when a short knife was placed in front of his neck, he woke up from his dream. He instinctively thought that Uehara Toda wanted to deal with him, so he immediately begged for mercy in Japanese. He also said that he had a lot of money, and as long as he could spare his life, he was willing to take it all out. If it was a normal person who was looking for money, he might have a chance when faced with these words. Unfortunately, he was facing Dao Shao, so everything was a different story. As the second captain of Longwei, Dao Shao estimated that Qiuyang Qindong's people were treated well, and many people could only look up to him. Yang Qindong used people based on their ability, and at the same time, he valued loyalty even more. If a person's character was not good, then no matter how capable they would not enter his eyes. In terms of using people, Yang Qindong was very clear that words alone were not enough to have an absolute effect. They also needed to have a guarantee of living conditions. Therefore, every Longwei person's monthly salary was high enough to support a family of 50 people. In his own words, if you want people to work for you, how can you be stingy when it comes to money? This was also why people with ability were sharpening their brains to enter Longwei. Not only did it give them face, but it also gave them money. Dao Shao was one of the people who enjoyed this kind of treatment, and he could be considered one of the people who benefited. Hearing Nishitoshi's words, he who had learned some Japanese said impatiently, "Shut up, or I'll kill you right now." I'll shut up. Nishitoshi did not dare to speak. He could feel that the black-clothed man in front of him was full of murderous intent. What he said was not to scare him, but he really did not know how many people he had killed to give others such a feeling. The world quieted down, and Dao Shao finally continued with his work. "To tell you the truth, as long as you listen to me, I won't kill you. Now, write a letter and copy the content." He took out a letter and threw it in front of Nishitoshi, who was kneeling on the ground. Hearing that he could not die, Nishitoshi's head nodded like a chicken eating food. Then he took out the letter, and after reading it, his face turned ugly. The content of the letter was not complicated. In his tone, he said that Uehara Toda had reached an agreement with the 5-star army, and that they were ready to attack the great general together. After reading the content, Nishitoshi was sure that the black-clothed man in front of him was not an ordinary bandit. He was not here for money, but for a purpose. Slowly raising his head, Nishitoshi wanted to ask about the identity of the black-clothed man, but before he could open his mouth, pain spread through his whole body. Then, blood flowed down his neck, and a fleshy ear appeared in Dao Zhao's hand. "Pa!" A broken ear was thrown in front of Nishitoshi, who wanted to scream but did not dare. He finally saw Dao Zhao's ruthless side, and he knew that everything just now was not a joke. He immediately lowered his head and looked for a pen and paper. Ningxi Duishio was very cooperative. In order to survive, he carefully read the letter after copying it. After making sure that there were no mistakes, he presented the letter to Dao Shao with both hands with a flattering look on his face, as if he was trying to suck up to Dao Shao. Logically speaking, he was also a talent. He had a glib tongue and could speak directly to people's hearts, which was why he was used by Ashikaga Yoshimasa. However, he was only good at talking. Although he had practiced martial arts before, it was not worth mentioning in front of Dao Shao. It was not an exaggeration to describe it as a scholar meeting a soldier. Chapter 1101. Everyone only had one life, and Nishitoshio didn't dare to gamble, nor did he dare to play any tricks. All he could do was to cooperate and gamble on the hope of survival. Obviously, he lost the gamble. Dao Zhao's mission was to force Nishitoshio to write the letter and then kill him. This was an order from Yang Qindong himself, and all he had to do was to carry it out 100%. After receiving the letter and verifying that there was no mistake, he thrust the dagger forward and stabbed it into the heart made of flesh and blood. Ning Shiduoshio was dead. Nishitoshio was dead. The body was found the next morning by a subordinate who came to deliver food to the room. The matter was quickly reported to Uehara Toda in the general's residence. But at this moment, General Uehara was meeting with Guan Xing, and the letter in his hand was written by the Supreme General Ashikaga Yoshimasa himself. It said that he took the initiative to give the Hakariku to the 5-star army. After confirming that it was written by Ashikaga Yoshimasa himself, Uehara Toda couldn't help but curse angrily, "Bastard." This was equivalent to him being betrayed and becoming a part of the transaction. He always thought that he was someone important, but now it seemed that the Supreme General didn't even care about the 80,000 soldiers under his command. It could be imagined that once the 5-star army was gone, the Supreme General would turn around and lead the army to destroy him. There was some heartache. The feeling of not being valued greatly hit Uehara Toda's self-confidence, and it also inspired him to have a greater idea of success. Guan Xing, who was sitting across from him, spoke at the right time. "General Uehara, don't be too angry. In the end, people still need to rely on their strength to speak. If you don't have strength, you'll only harm yourself." "What? Do you want to laugh at this, General?" Uehara Toda, who was in a bad mood, said coldly, and there was even a trace of murderous aura around him. "So what if you're the messenger of the 5-star army? This is the Hakariku, my headquarters. No one can act tough in front of me." The murderous aura was faintly discernible, but Guan Xing didn't seem to feel it. He still chuckled and said, "General, you misunderstand. Since I'm here, of course I won't harm you. On the contrary, I'm here to give you a gift." "Gift? What gift?" Uehara Toda's face had a trace of confusion, and looking closely, there was a trace of vigilance. There had to be something fishy going on. He didn't believe that the 5-star army, who had no relation to him, would give him such a big gift. There might be some kind of trap. Guan Xing's next words made him realize that he had been overthinking things. The 5-star army was indeed going to give him a big gift, but he had to fight for it himself. Because according to Guan Xing, his so-called gift was only a way for him to move forward. "General, our Bugnam of Gojosian said that he doesn't want to get involved in your internal strife. If it wasn't for the fact that Princess Junko has become the 8th madam, our 5-star army wouldn't even want to get involved in your Japanese Empire's affairs. All of this is just to give the princess an explanation. Next, they just need to go to Ping in Beijing and take back the palace. The 5-star army's goal will be achieved, and they will stop. And unless someone provokes them, they will turn a blind eye to the internal strife of the Japanese Empire." As soon as Guan Xing's words fell, Uehara Toda chuckled. "Emissary, you clearly want to watch us fight among ourselves, so that we can disintegrate without a single soldier." "General, you're wrong. What I said just now can be announced to the world in the form of a document. To be honest, if you really want to do something to the general, the 80,000 soldiers in your hands may not be enough." Guan Xing's tone also became a lot more serious. "Negotiations are like this. It's not advisable to blindly use force or soft tactics. Only by using both can you achieve your goal." Being looked down upon again, Uehara Toda's temper rose. He stared fiercely at Guan Xing, and it looked like he would ask someone to kill the person in front of him at any time. But before he could speak, footsteps came from outside the room. A guard walked in without permission with an anxious look on his face. Originally, Uehara Toda wanted to scold his subordinate for not following the rules, but when he saw the anxious look on his face, Uehara Toda knew something was wrong and asked, "What happened?" "General, things are not good." The guard walked forward and told Uehara Toda about Naioi Toxiu's death in his room. When Uehara Toda received the news, his expression changed again and again. Suddenly he looked fiercely at Guan Xing and said, "Naioi Toxiu is dead. Did you send someone to do it?" "Oh, this is really bad news, but I really didn't send someone to do it." Guan Xing looked surprised, then spread his hands and didn't admit it. Originally, he didn't give the order. Everything was Yang Qindong's idea. Seeing that Guan Xing still didn't want to get involved at this time, Uehara Toda said angrily, "What? Do you really think that I won't dare to kill you if you don't admit it?" Let me tell you, this is not the barracks of the 5-star army. This is my general's mansion. Hee hee. Of course I know that this is the general's mansion, and I know that the general can kill me with a casual order, but will you really do this? Nioi Toxiu is dead, and the general's side has become your enemy. If something happens to me now, the 5-star army will come. I really want to ask General Uehara, are your 80,000 soldiers really made of iron? Guan Xing wasn't a pushover. Since things had already come to this point, he had no way out, so he might as well tell the serious consequences. Guan Xing went all out and showed his trump card, as if he wasn't afraid of death. This time, it was Uehara Toda's turn to be stunned. Originally, he wanted to take advantage of both sides, even if he saw the general's handwritten letter. So what? He never expected that the other party would treat him sincerely. The two sides could only use each other. Being used by the other party at least meant that he was valuable. As long as he handled it well, he might be able to get benefits from it and continue to watch the tigers fight on the mountain. But now Nioi Toxiu was dead, and he died in his own territory. Once the general knew about this, would he forgive him? As for Guan Xing, although his current behavior was very infuriating, as long as he still had a bit of intelligence, he wouldn't touch this person. What kind of joke was this? If he really killed Guan Xing, it would be the same as igniting a fire on himself. At that time, it was very likely that the general and the 5-star army would join forces to destroy him first. Don't think that there wasn't such a possibility. In the face of huge benefits, anything was possible. If you didn't dare to think about it, it would only prove that you were stupid and you would be eliminated. Forcing himself to calm down, Uehara Toda looked at Guan Xing with a bit of admiration in his eyes. Honorable envoy, if I lead the army to attack Ashikaga Yoshimasa now, what kind of help can you give me? At this time, Guan Xing seemed to have changed into a different person. He was no longer as impulsive as before. His face regained a smile and said, "The 5-star army will send troops with you, General. We will send troops to Ping and Beijing and take it down. At the same time, I can assure you that unless there is an army in Shanin Road that provokes the 5-star army, we will definitely not send troops there. There will only be one master here, and that is you, General Uehara." Whether it was a promise or a guarantee, at least the words were comfortable to listen to. Uehara Toda also knew that it was very difficult for the 5-star army to make such a promise in such a situation, because now he had no other choice. Other than finding a way to defeat Ashikaga Yoshimasa, he could only stay in place and wait for the other party to take the initiative to attack him. When that time came, he was afraid that he wouldn't even have the slightest chance of winning. Sooner or later, they would have to fight, so it was better to strike first and gain the upper hand. While the Flatwell Field was still fighting with the great general in Vietnam, he could take the initiative to send troops, and he could have one more ally, which would increase his chances of winning. Okay, I hope the honorable envoy will remember your promise. I need you to write what you just said into a document and then announce it to the world. Uehara Toda stood up. At this time, he was ready to send troops. No problem. Then I wish you, General Uehara, to win every battle and be invincible, ha ha ha. Guan Xing also stood up. He knew that this time he had completed the task given to him by the 6th young master. He had made a great contribution. Ha ha, thank you for your kind words. Uehara Toda also laughed. He couldn't wait to see how powerful the great general's army was, and what kind of sparks would be created when the two sides collided on the battlefield. Since he had decided to send troops, of course, he couldn't have any hesitation. It was a taboo for a general to be indecisive. In just 3 days, 20,000 vanguard troops set off from the Shanin Road, along the edge of Ping and Beijing, to the Hokuriku Road, and rushed behind the great general. When the news reached the 5-star army's camp, Yang Qindong patted the desk and shouted, and then said to Beta Persei beside him, "Give the order. Everything will be done according to the plan." "Yes, young master." Beta Persei was also very excited and turned around to make the arrangements. Orders were sent out from the radio and spread to all directions. The armies, which had long been prepared for battle, were like dark clouds covering the moon, pressing towards the Japanese Empire's Kyoto, Ping, and Beijing. In the Hokuriku Roads, Vietnam, after several fierce battles, Ashikaga Yoshimasa won another battle with the help of his troops that were several times more numerous than the other side, and finally occupied this area. According to the news, Flat Well Field only retreated to Ekigo Prefecture with 20,000 people. The great general, who occupied Ekigo and Ekigo prefectures in succession, was full of righteousness. The powerful strength he showed also deterred some small warlords and small forces who wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to send troops to take advantage of him. As long as he occupied Ekigo prefecture, even if he didn't capture Flat Well Field alive, the situation would be settled. At that time, he could spare some time to deal with the 5-star army. He wanted to let everyone see that in the Japanese Empire, he, the great general, was the most capable person, and this place would eventually belong to him. Chapter 1102. Ashikaga Yoshimasa hadn't even fully digested the news of victory when a letter personally written by Ninji Toshihida appeared in front of him. Then his face turned from green to red to white, and finally became as black as charcoal. Uehara Tashiru of the mountain and village actually joined forces with the 5-star army, and it looked like they were going to attack him. This person only had 80,000 troops. Did he eat a bear's heart and leopard's guts? With only 80,000 people, he dared to attack his 500,000 troops? General Mari Regularization was in the big tent at the moment, waiting for the Supreme General's orders, and was lucky enough to see this letter. He also said with a puzzled face, "Supreme General, could Nishi Tashiru have been deceived?" Ashikaga Yoshimasa understood the meaning of Mari Regularization's words and asked, "Are you saying that this news is false?" It's not that I doubt Nishi Tashiru's news, but it really doesn't make sense. Who is Uehara Tashiru? He's famous for being slippery. How could he make an enemy out of the great general for no reason? Mao Li Zheng said seriously, as if he was discussing the matter. But only he knew in his heart that he didn't like Nishi Tashiru. The two of them were the Supreme General's right-hand men, and it was common for them to secretly fight. If there was a chance, of course, he wouldn't mind stepping on them. It makes sense. Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who also didn't understand, nodded lightly and said, "In this case, arrange people to go to the mountain and village again to see Nishi Tashiru and see what's going on." Because of confidence, Ashikaga Yoshimasa never put Uehara Tashiru in his eyes, and he didn't think that he would take the initiative to attack him, so he didn't make any defensive preparations. Everything didn't change until 3 days later. In the main tent, Ashikaga Yoshimasa summoned his generals and daimyos and was discussing how to send troops to Ekigo Prefecture and how to kill Flat Well Field. Suddenly, a scout came into the tent with a panicked face. He knelt on the ground with an ugly face and handed over a letter in his hand. When the scout rushed into the tent, Ashikaga Yoshimasa felt that something was wrong. When he took the letter and read it, he only felt that his vision turned black. He forced himself to stand up and slammed the desk in front of him and said, "Baka! Uehara Tashiru, 5-star army, damn it!" This roar also startled the other generals. Mari Regularization was the first to react, took the letter on the desk and read it, then his face turned ugly and said, clenching his fists, and said, "Supreme General, didn't you say that Matsumoto Kazuma is dead? How could he stand up and accuse us?" Throwing Mari Regularization a supercilious look, Ashikaga Yoshimasa didn't know what was going on. It was just that the matter had already happened, and it was no longer the time to worry about this problem. The most important thing was how to deal with the current complicated situation. The letter had already said that the 5-star army was attacking Ping in Beijing, and they used powerful firearms. The city couldn't hold on any longer. Also, Uehara Tashiru had sent troops along the edge of Ping and Beijing to Ekigo Prefecture. Fortunately, when he received Nishi Tashiru's letter, he sent someone to remind the troops guarding there. So when they were attacked, they didn't have the power to fight back. But after all, they didn't make a sufficient plan, so they might be able to hold on for a while, but it became a fact that they couldn't hold on. Ashikaga Yoshimasa didn't expect that the situation that seemed to be favorable to him would suddenly change so much. His face became quite ugly. After a while, he forcibly suppressed his anger and began to analyze the situation rationally. I'm afraid that Ping and Beijing won't be able to hold on. Since that's the case, immediately arrange for Fukada Tani to stay there and let him save his strength and retreat first. As for Uehara Tashiru, I'll leave it to General Maori. I'll give you 100,000 troops. Do you have the confidence to defeat him? Ashikaga Yoshimasa didn't give up and continued to move forward. He wanted to capture Ekigo Prefecture and completely defeat the flat well field. In his eyes, the other forces in the country were nothing to be afraid of. Only this person was proficient in both the pen and the sword. If he didn't get rid of him, he would be a big problem in his heart. Yes, General, please rest assured, this subordinate will definitely complete the task. Leading an army of 100,000 troops, Maori Regularization's eyes were full of excitement and excitement. Good. The other plans remain unchanged. The main force of the army will continue to move to Ekigo Prefecture. The others will do what they should do. In short, this is the Japanese Empire we won't lose. At the end of the meeting, Ashikaga Yoshimasa didn't forget to cheer everyone up. At this time, his eyes also showed a sense of determination, but also a sense of resentment. This time he was schemed against by the 5-star army and Uehara Tashiru. He will remember this hatred, and one day he will get his revenge. Ping and Beijing outskirts. At this moment, it has all become the territory of the 5-star army. When Yang Qindong's order was issued, the 4th Division and the 7th Army, who had been waiting here for a long time, launched a fierce attack on the Japanese army outside Ping and Beijing with 100mm mortars. The cannonballs that fell from the sky caught the Neon troops, who were guarding their off-guard. Fukada Tani, who was in charge of the defense of Ping and Beijing, felt great pressure in the situation where he couldn't even see where the enemy was. After half an hour of continuous artillery fire, they basically destroyed the anti-cavalry weapons, and even the formation of the army was in chaos. The soldiers didn't know their generals, and the generals didn't know their soldiers. At this time, there was a huge tremor on the ground, and the cavalry of the 5-star army began to attack. With the 1st Cavalry Division in the lead and the cavalry of the new 3 armies as support, there were more than 40,000 people in total. Looking from afar, it was as if a black tornado was rushing over, pressuring toward them. This horrifying scene in the eyes of Daimyo Fukada, he could not help but tremble all over. He had long heard that the cavalry of the 5-star army was very powerful, and that they could compete with the people on horseback. The descendants of the Mongolians and the grassland cavalry are even more powerful. For this reason, Fukada Tani not only prepared a lot of anti-cavalry stakes, but also enough bows and arrows. He wanted to give this cavalry a head-on attack and let them know how powerful he was. But now, when he really faced the cavalry of the 5-star army, he knew that the rumors were true. Just the momentum of this attack made people feel powerless. Not to mention that all of his preparations were already destroyed by the artillery fire. Block, block. Fukada Tani's heart was filled with fear, but his mouth was very tough. He called out the names of a few of his subordinates and ordered them to block the cavalry of the 5-star army, while he himself led the main force to retreat to Ping and Beijing. He wanted to defend the high city, and these soldiers were left behind to buy time for his army to retreat. Charge! Kill! On the sturdy war horse, Tian, who held his sword in one hand, and with the other hand he constantly made all kinds of hand gestures to command the cavalry to advance. With him as the leader, the arrow point formation was the first to meet the enemy, and then like a drill, they drilled into the enemy camp. As soon as they entered the enemy camp, Tian, who held his sword with both hands and relying on his body's balance technique, he was as natural as sitting on a brick bed in his own house. Under his steady body, the two swords continuously slashed forward and to the side. The soldiers of the Japanese Empire were like scarecrows in training. In a short period of time, he had advanced more than 100 meters, and unexpectedly, no one was his match and no one was able to block his charge. Like Tian Hu, the other commanders and the arrow point formation of the arrow point formation were also doing the same thing. Wherever they went, no one was their match. Some of them were only wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves. Some of them were only severed limbs, and some of them were only covered by the enemy's head and fled. For commanders, a total of 8,000 soldiers of the Japanese Empire were quickly penetrated. In addition to a large amount of blood on the ground, there were densely packed soldiers kneeling on the ground and begging to surrender. They were frightened by the powerful combat power of the 5-star Army cavalry, and when they discovered that those who resisted were quickly decapitated, their fighting spirit began to collapse. More and more soldiers put down their dignity and knelt on the ground, becoming prisoners of war who had no dignity on the battlefield, but could live on. Continue to charge. The 6th young master has ordered us to quickly take Ping and Beijing, and we can't give the enemy any time to breathe. Major General Tian, who rode on his horse. After penetrating the enemy's defense system, he spurred his horse forward and continued to lead the cavalry towards the capital of Ping and Beijing. Ping and Beijing was the capital of the Japanese Empire. Although it was far less majestic than some of the cities in the Great Ming Dynasty because of its conditions, it still had its own unique characteristics. This place was about to become his territory. If possible, Yang Qindong didn't want to destroy it too much. That was why he gave the order to the cavalry before the attack. It would be best if they could storm into the city with lightning speed, but if they couldn't, they were to retreat first and leave everything to the 4th Division and the 7th Army's 2 firearms divisions. Yang Qindong had given him hope, so Tian, who naturally had to follow the best goal. Before the battle had even begun, he had already called over the 5 captains under him and expressed his stance. We are the 1st Cavalry Division, the most powerful existence in the 5-star Army. Now is the time to prove ourselves. Do you all have the confidence to complete the mission? Yes. The 5 commanders all stood in the most standard military posture and replied. This was the reason why they were in front of them. They were completely unsatisfied with defeating the Japanese army and occupying the periphery of Ping and Beijing. Their goal was to storm into the city and make a great contribution. In the rear, Ling Daqiang, the commander of the 4th Division, and Tian Su, the commander of the 7th Army, used binoculars to watch the 1st Cavalry Division continuously advance forward. When they put down the binoculars, the 2 commanders rubbed their eyes and revealed an incredulous expression. At this moment, their inner thoughts were extremely unified. The 1st Cavalry Division was the 1st Division, and they were worthy of this name. They were like madmen on the battlefield, invincible. They actually did as the 6th young master said, and were about to storm into Ping and Beijing without the support of their artillery. Chapter 1103. The time to sigh was very short. The changes on the battlefield were often abnormal, so it was impossible to give the commander more time to think. All soldiers listen to my order. Run and keep up. Charge into Ping and Beijing and occupy the capital of Hainan. Charge into Ping and Beijing and occupy the capital of Hainan. The 2 division commanders couldn't let Tian Hu take all the credit. They also wanted a share of the pie. Thus, they broke their original plan of waiting and watching. They began to speed up and run forward. The new army commander, Su, he also had the same idea. He was once a general of the Tatar tribe and had competed with Tian Hu for the position of commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. Seeing that his brother's cavalry didn't stay on the battlefield and continued to charge forward, he gritted his teeth and said, "4th Cavalry Division, stay behind and clean up the battlefield. The other 3 divisions, follow me and charge forward. Charge!" The original plan of fighting steadily and steadily was completely changed. Under the leadership of Major General Tian, who, tens of thousands of 5-star army soldiers gave up on the steady rhythm and changed to charging forward. It seemed like they wouldn't stop until they entered Ping and Beijing. This made Tani, who was leading his troops to retreat, suffer. After running for a while, he arrived at Ping and Beijing. When he turned around, he saw that the 5-star army cavalry was less than 5 or 6 miles away from him. He immediately lost his mind. "How dare you?" Pointing angrily at the 1st Cavalry Division that was hot on his heels, Shan Tianya really wanted to reprimand them, and even more wanted to warn them that the capital of Peace City had solid walls. It was not a place where they could behave atrociously. "Fukada daimyo, let's enter the city first." Some of his subordinates saw that Tani was so angry that his face turned red, although they were surprised by the arrogance of the 5-star army cavalry. They knew that they would only be safe if they entered the city. Shouting like this now was useless. "All right, let's enter the city and order the soldiers to shoot arrows up the city walls. I would like to see if these cavalry can still fly up when faced with the solid city gates and city walls." Tani suppressed the anger in his heart. After saying this to his subordinates, he turned around and entered Ping and Beijing. After that, the city gate closed from the inside, completely closing when the 1st Cavalry Division was about 700 to 800 meters away. Once the city gates were closed, it was as if all dangers were isolated from the outside world. The Japanese army soldiers inside the gate let out a long sigh of relief. At the same time, more people rushed towards the 2 sides of the passage. They wanted to rush up the tower and use their bows and arrows to return fire. They wanted to let these arrogant 5-star army cavalry know the consequences of angering them. Major General Tian, who was charging forward with all his strength, watched as the south gate of Ping and Beijing was closed. His expression did not change at all. Since he wanted to attack Ping and Beijing in one go, he naturally made sufficient preparations before doing so. "Where is the 1st Regiment commander?" Tian, who slowed down the speed of his warhorse and turned around to ask. "Commander, I'm here," Temu answered loudly from dozens of meters behind him on the left. As the tip of another arrow, he had been following behind Tian who the whole time, never leaving or abandoning him. When he saw Temu and realized that he was very close to him, Tian, whose original serious expression changed. He laughed loudly and said, "Very good, 1st Regiment Commander. I'll leave the rest to you. Whether or not you can obtain the 1st merit will depend on your performance. Please rest assured, Commander. Leave everything to the 1st Regiment." "Temu," said with great ambition. "Temu," said with great ambition. Then he suddenly tore open his jacket, revealing 4 black-headed, wooden-handled grenades. Temu was not the only one who did this. His entire team of about 30 people tore open their coats, revealing the tightly wrapped grenades. Their faces were filled with bloodthirsty, murderous intent. This was a group of lunatics. They actually strapped grenades to their bodies during a battle. If there were any sparks, or if the fuse was accidentally triggered, wouldn't there be a huge accident? But it had to be said that although they were crazy, they had succeeded. At least they had not encountered any accidents when they reached this place, and it was because of their risk that they now had the opportunity to break through the city gate. Temu, and the other 30 people were making preparations. Tian, who was not idle either. He rode his horse to the south gate of Ping and Beijing. He put away his dual swords and picked up his strong bow. He aimed at the top of the city gate tower and was ready to shoot at any time. Almost as soon as Tian Hu and his cavalrymen knocked their bows and arrows, many small heads of the Japanese army popped out from the city gate tower. They also had their bows and arrows ready and were looking down, ready to shoot their targets. As soon as they popped their heads out, both sides looked at each other and saw, clearly, Tian, whose voice was then heard. Release the arrows. Don't let them interfere with the 1st Regiment commander and the others. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The sound of arrows piercing through the air was incessant. The sharp arrows were shot directly at the Japanese army soldiers who had popped their heads out. In a moment of carelessness, dozens of Japanese army soldiers were shot. Some of them collapsed to the ground, while others fell from the tall city gate tower. This scene also frightened the other Japanese army soldiers. They quickly shrank back, trying to stay alive like turtles. Fukadatani, who had just arrived at the city gate tower, saw this scene. He immediately shouted angrily, "What are you afraid of? We have the high ground and we have the city gate as our defense. They should be the ones who are worried. Everyone, return fire immediately. Return fire." Under the command of their general, the soldiers finally had a backbone. They were no longer as scared as before and could finally organize a decent counterattack. With the advantage of having the high ground, they caused a lot of trouble for the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division. They didn't have as many soldiers as the other side, and the terrain wasn't favorable to them. If it were any other army, they wouldn't take the risk to fight this battle. Even in front of the 1st Cavalry Division, Tian, whose expression was still cold, he immediately ordered the soldiers to take out their shields. 2 people in a group, 1 person with a bow and the other with a shield. We must create an opportunity for the 1st Regiment commander and the others to blow open the city gate. Tian, whose voice was very calm. It was obvious that this wasn't a temporary idea. In fact, the 1st Cavalry Division had also undergone such training in the past. It was to prevent such a situation from happening. The preparation came in handy. 2 soldiers formed a group. 1 person held a shield to protect himself and his comrades, while the other person held a bow to look for an opportunity to counterattack. Arrows fell like rain. There were nearly 10,000 Japanese Empire soldiers on the top of the southern city gate of Ping and Beijing. Even if each of them released an arrow, the momentum was enough to frighten people. Once the arrows fell from the sky and hit the cavalry below, it was like a torrential downpour. It was said that a chaotic fist could kill a master. Under the chaotic arrows, even the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division couldn't guarantee that they could escape unscathed. In less than half an hour, nearly 100 soldiers had been hit by arrows. Among them, more than 10 people had been hit in the vital areas and had already died. Hurry up, hurry up. Tian, who was very unwilling to see his brothers die in such a cowardly defense. When he turned to look at Temu, his voice was filled with urgency. At this time, Temu, and the others had already removed all the grenades from their bodies and tied them together in groups of 4. After hearing his division commander shout, Temu was the first to charge. With his superb horse-riding skills, he held a shield in one hand and the 4 grenades tied together in the other. He charged fiercely toward the southern city gate of Ping and Beijing. Yang Chendong had once issued an order in the army. Unless it was absolutely necessary, the regimental commander or officers above the regimental commander level were not allowed to charge at will. After all, it wasn't easy to train such a high-ranking officer. He didn't want these outstanding talents to die in the chaos of a charge. Since it was Yang Chendong's order, everyone had to carry it out unconditionally. This was the importance of corps authority. However, this time, Temu broke this rule. Tian, who was watching all of this from a short distance, didn't stop him. This was because he knew very well that rules were dead, but people were alive. The more critical the situation was, the more important it was for a general to stand up and set an example. Temu took the lead and was the first to reach the city gate. When he reached the city gate, he threw the 4 grenades with their fuses already pulled out. Boom, 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 boom. Loud vibrations were heard. after a cloud of smoke. All the cavalrymen couldn't help but look toward the city gate. Unfortunately, it only covered the iron gate with a layer of black smoke. It didn't have much effect on the overall situation. Even grenades didn't work. It had to be said that the people of the Japanese Empire were very serious in their work. The quality of the city gate was really good. At the very least, it was beyond the expectations of the soldiers of the world's #1 cavalry division. Don't stop. Keep going. As long as you keep blasting, there's nothing you can't break. Tian, who wasn't discouraged, even though his attack didn't work. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought so many grenades in one go. Yes, continue. Temu had just retreated. He was initially shocked by the lack of effect. Now that he heard Tian Hu's words, he nodded vigorously and ordered the other soldiers to continue charging. The explosions weren't completely useless. On the city gate tower, the soldiers of the Japanese Empire felt a tremor under their feet. Some of the more timid ones had already squatted down and covered their heads. As the commanding general, Fukadatani was indeed a little more courageous. It wasn't that he wasn't afraid. It was just that he woke up earlier than the others. Ha ha ha, did you see that? Firearms are useless against the city gate. Everyone, don't worry. Continue to shoot arrows at the city gate tower. We have to use this opportunity to kill more enemies and gain more merits. Fukadatani was very active at this moment. Relying on the advantage of defending the city, Fukadatani was already fantasizing about the scene where they could inflict heavy damage on the cavalrymen of the 5-star army and gain great merits. Below the southern city gate, bundles of grenades were still exploding. The seemingly thick iron gate finally showed signs of loosening under the continuous bombardment. For this, the world's #1 cavalry division had paid the price of hundreds of men. Although less than 100 of them were killed by the arrows, more than 300 of them were injured. Many of them had already lost their ability to fight. It was conceivable that after this battle, they wouldn't be able to recover to their peak and could no longer stay in the army. Chapter 1104. Tian, whose heart bled at the sight of such heavy losses. These were all elite warriors. Losing any one of them would cause him to feel heartache, not to mention losing so many of them at once. Anxious, he continued to shout, "Regiment Commander 1, I'll give you 3 minutes. If you can't blow up the city gate, you'll be kicked out of the 1st Cavalry Division." Temu was still watching his subordinates throw grenades at the city gate. Because of this, 3 of his brothers had already been killed by arrows and 2 of them were seriously injured. He was also feeling terrible. When he heard Tian Hu's words, he was instantly enraged. "Come on, everyone, gather all the grenades and give them to me. I'll go all out." This was the only thought in Temu's mind. There was nothing sadder than watching his brothers die in battle in front of him. Sometimes he wished he was the one who died. In order to reduce the losses and open the city gate faster, Temu decided to go all out on his own. No one dared to disobey their regiment commander's orders. The soldiers around him quickly gathered the grenades and delivered them to Temu. Everyone seemed to know what their regiment commander was going to do. One of his company commanders took the initiative and said, "Regiment commander, let me go. The power of so many grenades combined is too great. It's too dangerous. Our regiment can't do without our regiment commander." "Yeah, we can't do without our regiment commander," the other soldiers chimed in. "Cut the crap. I know what I'm going to do." Temu didn't intend to listen to everyone's opinions. This was because he knew that this was an extremely dangerous move. What was dangerous was not whether they could reach the city gate, but the power of so many grenades exploding at the same time. The shockwave from the explosion would often cause people to be affected before they could completely retreat. That was the real danger. But so what if he knew it was dangerous? He was the regiment commander and enjoyed more glory than anyone else. When there was danger, he should naturally be the one to face it. Only then would he be worthy of everything he was enjoying now. With a cold expression, Temu quickly tied all the grenades together. Looking at the bag of fire that was the size of a bag of explosives, he let out a silly laugh. He didn't believe that the city gate would be able to withstand such powerful explosives. Everyone back off. Back off some more. Temu weighed the explosive's power and realized that it could barely be held with one hand. Then he began to prepare to charge. Everyone retreated reluctantly and unwillingly. This was the military rule of the 5-star army. Once the commanding officer gave an order, the soldiers under him had to obey. It was this iron discipline that allowed them to fight well and win every battle. Haha, let's go. Temu removed the bow, shield, and 2 sabers from his horse. He wanted to go into battle light and maintain his fastest speed and best condition. After doing all this, he shouted boldly and galloped toward the city gate. The commotion here attracted the attention of the division commander, Tianhu. When he saw Temu rushing down the city gate tower alone on his horse, he couldn't help but cry out in alarm. F***CK, Regiment Commander 1, come back! Temu, who was already halfway out, couldn't carry out any military orders now. As the saying went, there was no turning back. If he stopped now, he would only suffer greater losses. Seeing Temu rush toward the city gate without hesitation, Tianhu, who usually didn't show his emotions on his face, had tears in his eyes. Brother, I wish you good luck. Everyone else, quickly retreat. Retreat. Knowing the power of so many grenades combined, Tianhu gave the order for the cavalry to retreat. Below the city gate tower, many Japanese Empire soldiers saw Temu galloping toward them on horseback. Although they didn't know what he was going to do, they instinctively aimed their arrows at him. In a short period of time, Temu was hit by 2 arrows. Fortunately, he was very experienced and managed to avoid the fatal blow. The 2 arrows only caused minor injuries to him. Grandsons, have a taste of the gifts Grandpa has prepared for you. Ha ha ha. Temu, who had arrived at the city gate, pulled out a set of grenades with his left hand and threw them down the city gate. Then he pounced toward a puddle of water below the city gate tower. With such great power, he wouldn't even have the chance to retreat. Not to mention, there were so many Japanese Empire soldiers eyeing him from the city gate tower. Temu didn't plan to go back. Instead, he threw himself into the puddle of water, gambling on his luck. Just as Temu's figure plunged into the puddle of water, a loud bang was heard. At this moment, the ground was shaking violently. Even the Japanese army soldiers on the city gate tower felt like they were losing their balance. Tianhu and the others, who were a few hundred meters away from the city gate, were better off. After all, they had already mentally prepared themselves. However, after hearing the loud bang and not seeing Temu running back, Tianhu couldn't help but feel his eyes turn red. Brothers, the city gate has been blown open. Our 1st Regiment commander paid the price with his life. Everyone listen to my orders. Charge, kill. Kill, kill, kill. Influenced by Temu, the eyes of the other soldiers also turned red. Then, under the command of their division commander, all of them rushed toward the south gate that had been blown open by the powerful grenades. Right now, they only had one thought in mind: to avenge their 1st Regiment commander and wipe out the Japanese army. With the city gate broken, the cavalry of the 5-star army rushed into the city. Fukada Tani, who had a smug look on his face, turned gloomy. Very quickly it turned into fear. He knew that they were done for this time. Although there weren't many cavalrymen, the morale of the troops was in chaos. They couldn't put up any effective resistance at all. General, let's retreat. 2 soldiers walked up to Fukada Tani anxiously and helped him up. Then they quickly ran down the city gate tower. After the 1st Cavalry Division entered the city, their advantage began to increase. With the help of the war horses, wherever they went, the Japanese army was slaughtered until they were wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves. At the same time, because the 1st Cavalry Division's movements were too fast, a lot of the Japanese army supplies were left behind. When Tian, who saw the mountain of rations and equipment under the escort of a group of soldiers, a smile finally appeared on this major general's face. What made him even happier was that the 1st Regiment of soldiers found Temu at the bottom of the city gate tower. He had cleverly jumped into the ditch and managed to survive with the protection of the water. However, the power of the explosion was too strong, and he was knocked unconscious. At the same time, his armor was torn, and his back was covered in wounds. Timur is still alive. That's great. Gather the best medical officers in the division immediately. We must preserve the life of the 1st Regiment commander. Our world's number 1 Cavalry Division cannot be without him. Tian, who was naturally overjoyed as he spoke. Then he couldn't stop laughing foolishly. After the 1st Cavalry Division entered the city, they first guarded some important places in the city. In the end, because of the lack of manpower, they did not chase after Fukada Tani and the rest of the Japanese army who had escaped. More than 2 hours later, the new army also entered the city, and the situation in the city was completely stabilized. At this point, it could be announced that Ping and Beijing had completely fallen into the hands of the 5-star army. Yang Qindong entered Ping and Beijing the next afternoon, accompanied by Junko. The 1st Cavalry Division did not disappoint. Under the circumstances where the 4th Army Division and the 7th Army Firearms Division were not in place, they blew up the city gate alone and made a great contribution. This made Yang Qindong very happy. He first went to the temporary hospital to visit Temu, who had already been treated and had woken up. From the military doctor, he learned that Temu only had a back injury and that it was not a serious problem. After resting for a few days, he could continue to fight. Yang Qindong was even more happy. In the temporary hospital, in front of everyone, he recorded Temu's first-class merit and at the same time awarded him a Medal of Bravery. This was the first time the Medal of Bravery was presented to the public. In the past, people had only heard of it, but no one had ever seen it, let alone received this honor. In the midst of everyone's envy, Temu received the Medal of Bravery. His entire body was grinning from ear to ear. At this moment, he enjoyed everyone's congratulations and blessings, but he also enjoyed all the envy and jealousy. Major General Tian, who was also one of them, he had also dreamed of receiving this Medal of Bravery one day. This was the only way to prove his strength. However, this time, not only did he not receive it, but he was also reprimanded by Yang Qindong. Didn't I say that regimental officers can't casually charge with the army? You, on the other hand, directly let the regiment commander take the risk. Fortunately, nothing happened to Temu. Otherwise, I would definitely punish you. After there was no one else around, Yang Qindong's face turned cold as he reprimanded Tian Hu. Teacher, I was wrong. Tian Hu, who had always been proud, did not even dare to breathe when facing Yang Qindong. He knew very well who gave him everything he had. And this time, he was indeed a little reckless. Seeing that Tian Hu's attitude of admitting his mistake was not bad, Yang Qindong's anger subsided. All right, don't do it again. Also, you guys have worked hard this time. When you go back, look for Beta Persei. He will prepare enough wine and meat for you to celebrate. Okay. When he heard that there was a celebration, Tian Hu chuckled. At this moment, he was no different from a child who had received candy. This was all because this celebration was arranged by his teacher for the 1st Cavalry Division. This was enough to prove that their division's performance in this operation was the best, and the best. Just as Tian Hu thought, once the news that the 1st Cavalry Division was allowed to hold a celebration by Yang Qindong spread, it attracted the envy and jealousy of the other divisions. Chapter 1105. The 5-star army was usually treated very well. Even when there was no war, they were always given food and wine. However, this celebration banquet was different. The 6th young master had given them special permission. This proved the importance of the 1st Cavalry Division. We have to perform well. Next time, we can't let the world's 1st Cavalry Division get all the glory. Su He, the commander of the new 3rd Army, called over a few of his division commanders and said with high fighting spirit, "That's right. As long as we work hard, the new army will definitely be the one celebrating next time," said the division commanders in unison. The same scene was happening in the other units as well. Even the 4th and 7th divisions of the Lu army were not spared from this. The cold front represented the most elite troops. However, ever since the 1st Cavalry Division appeared, they had lost a lot of their limelight. Because of this, the division commanders of the 4th Division and 7th Division were very depressed. They secretly decided that they would perform better in the next battle. They wanted to prove to the world that the cold front was still the cold front. They were still the most powerful existence. An army's morale, equipment, and combat power were the comprehensive criteria to determine whether an army was strong or not. Everyone had their own thoughts. How to unify these people's thoughts and unleash double the power of an army was something the commander had to consider. If the commander was good, it was very likely that 10,000 people could unleash the combat power of 20,000 or even more. On the other hand, if the commander was not good, the 10,000 people might not even be able to unleash half of their combat power. A single celebration banquet was enough to ignite the fighting spirit of all the troops. This was the embodiment of Yang Qindong's talent in commanding. In particular, Taimu, receiving the first hero's medal, had greatly stimulated the others. Taimu used to be a Manchu. He was promoted to the Han race because of his outstanding performance. He had received the first warrior's medal, which was more representative. It showed that the 6th young master treated everyone equally. At the same time, it also encouraged more people. They believed that as long as they did not care about their background, they would also have a better performance and receive more honor through hard work. The appearance of the celebration banquet and the warrior medal had already excited the soldiers of the 5-star army stationed in Ping and Beijing. They couldn't wait to fight on the battlefield. They needed a better opportunity and platform to perform. Yang Qindong didn't seem to care about all this. At this moment, he was accompanying Princess Junko in the imperial palace in Ping and Beijing. When he returned to this place again, the environment had not changed much, but his companions had indeed changed. Now that her father and mother were gone, Junko could only rely on her husband, Yang Qindong. In a long corridor in the imperial palace, Junko leaned into Yang Qindong's arms like a little bird. Her eyes were looking at Mount Fuji, also known as Sakura Mountain, not far away. "King, you will accompany Junko until she is old, right?" "Yes." "King, you will never abandon Junko or dislike Junko, right?" "Yes." "King, even if Junko is old and no longer young and beautiful, you will still like Junko, right?" "Yes." "King, yes." Uehara Toda, who was on his way to the Northern Land Road from the Shanin Road, received the news that the 5-star army had conquered Ping and Beijing. So fast. When he received the news, Uehara Toda was resting in a temporary tent, and then his face showed a shocked expression. He thought that with the strength of the 5-star army, conquering Ping and Beijing with only 30,000 people was just a matter of time, but he did not expect it to be so fast. From the beginning to the end of the attack, it was less than 2 days. Did the seemingly well-defended Japanese empire's Kyoto fall just like that? He did not know whether he should be lamenting the incompetence of the Supreme General's subordinates, or the 5-star army was too powerful. But no matter what the result was, Uehara Toda knew that he should speed up. He wanted to take advantage of the fact that the Supreme General was heavily injured to fight back. He wanted to let others know that not only was the 5-star army good at fighting, but he was also very good at fighting. Pass down the order, don't rest, immediately speed up the march, reach Ekizen Prefecture as soon as possible, and stab Ashikaga Yoshimasa in the ass. Uehara Toda was stimulated and finally decided to speed up the march. He, who was eager to make a contribution, did not know that there was a big ambush waiting for him in front. Rua Narrow area, adjacent to the Shanin Road's Danho Prefecture, is the gateway to the Northern Land Road. Uehara Toda suddenly appeared with 70,000 soldiers, and it seemed to have caught the enemy off guard. After resisting for a while, the Supreme General's army began to retreat, giving up the entire Rua Narrow area, and Uehara Toda won the first battle. After winning the first battle, Uehara Toda's morale quickly swelled, and he continued to send his troops to Etsu Prefecture. In his opinion, the Supreme Generalissimo should be focused on dealing with Hirai Ueda, and he would not have time to deal with him. This was his chance. Ekizen Prefecture, one of the largest prefectures in the Northern Land Road. Here, the Maori regularization led 100,000 Japanese army to wait for the arrival of Uehara Toda. In order to lure this opponent to appear faster, the Japanese army in Rua Narrow area took the initiative to retreat. All of this was also the order of the Maori regularization. The purpose was to make the opponent proud and arrogant, and then when the opponent was the most complacent and the defense was the most lax, they would give a heavy blow, proving to the Japanese Empire that the Supreme General's army was still the most capable. Dashi River is the burial ground that the Maori regularization prepared for Uehara Toda's 70,000 soldiers. This is a river that was brought inland by the sea. In the beginning, it was used to irrigate the farmland. Later, after the passage of time, it became a large river that was 17 or 18 meters wide. It meandered along the side of the road, like a long dragon entrenched in this area. The Maori regularization set the attack site here after serious consideration. With the river as the base, once the battle starts, the existence of Dashi River will become an excellent cover, allowing him to launch all kinds of attacks as he pleases. The Dashi River was blocked by a dense forest. It was precisely because of the existence of this forest that soil erosion was prevented, which prevented the river from continuing to expand. The Maori regularization's backup plan was placed in this dense forest. After the Supreme General gave the task, the Maori regularization began to prepare. First, he arranged for people to speed up the construction of the catapults. He doesn't need to attack too far away, as long as the catapults can hit more than 40 meters away, that is, 120 meters away. At that time, he is confident that the enemy can only defend and not attack. The requirements are not high, and he has the full support of the Supreme General, and the construction is in the dense forest, so he can use the nearby materials. 300 small catapults were quickly built, and after experiments, it was confirmed that the catapults can hit more than 50 meters to 100 meters. The Maori regularization was already very satisfied. 10,000 soldiers were left in the dense forest, and an average of 30 people were left in front of each catapult. It was enough. Mao Lijing brought the rest of the 90,000 soldiers to the other side of Dazahi, hiding in the uneven terrain about 5 miles away from Dazahi. Now, what he has to do is wait for the fish to take the bait. Completely unaware of all this, Uehara Toda, who was eager to prove himself, only arranged some scouts to do the preliminary battle, and quickly went all the way to Ekizen Prefecture. When those scouts passed by one side of the Daji River, they didn't stop there, because such a wide river was the safest place. Nobody could make use of such a terrain to set an ambush. However, they ignored the dense woods behind the river. After 6 days of preparation, Uehara Toda appeared, and together with him, there was a vast army of 70,000 soldiers walking on the official road, and looking from afar, there was no end to it. However, for many people, this would be the last time they would walk on this land, because it wouldn't be long before they would meet the King of Hell and become a soul without a physical body or even a pile of bones without a soul. Perhaps the shinobi wanted to destroy Uehara Toda, but in the afternoon he ordered the army to stop and camp and stop at the side of Dashi River. Maybe he thought that resting by the river would be safe and solve the problem of the army's water source. When the Maori regularization, who was already prepared to attack, heard this news, he almost jumped up in excitement. In the end, he suppressed his excitement and decided to change the time of the battle. When the opponent's military tents are set up, and when the opponent's army is eating, he will launch a fierce attack, and he will get the best result. More than an hour later, the sky gradually darkened, and the smell of food wafted out of the camp by the river. At this time, countless boulders suddenly fell from the sky. Some of them were catapults that threw gunpowder that the Neon had learned from the great Ming dynasty. For a time, it was like a heavy rain, falling into Uehara Toda's army, making the 70,000-man army dizzy. The sudden attack, whether it was the gunpowder or the boulders, most of them fell beside the military tents, and some of them accurately fell in the military tents, killing many people on the spot. Watching this scene, Uehara Toda, who was lucky enough not to be hit, was scared and horrified. He did not expect that the Grand General had already sent people to stop him. To think that he had thought that no one would know about his actions. But at this moment, he didn't have time to think about why the news was leaked, why the Army General's army was defeated again and again, and why he prepared an ambush in advance and organized this unexpected counterattack. Now he was only thinking about how to counterattack and stabilize his position. Under Yang Qindong's orders, the secret letter that Dao Xiao forced Ning Shidakusu to write finally worked, and it gave Ashikaga Yoshimasa more time to react, which led to Uehara Toda's current disaster. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.